May 23rd at 6:30 p.m. We're grateful and privileged to work, live, and play in the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people of the Esquimalt and Songhees nations, whose stewardship of this land continue to this day. Okay, just due to an administrative error, item 9.3 can be deleted off your agendas. It's actually part of the omnibus recommendation under 9.2. So that's one change. And the second thing is, please note that the long-term agenda has now been removed and it will be reinstated upon receipt of council's new strategic priorities and service plans. So that is forthcoming. So may I have a motion and seconder for receipt of the near-term agenda and adoptions of tonight's agenda as amended? Ward and Grove. Any question? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous approved. Just under Mayor's message, just one quick message here. Just a quick reminder to all the citizens of Colwood and to council that the grand opening of the new quality foods at Royal Bay and Cascadia Liquor Store are scheduled for this Thursday at 9 a.m. in the morning. Okay, may I have a mover and seconder to adopt the regular council meeting minutes held on May 8th, the special council meeting minutes held on May 11th and May 15th, and the minutes of the following meetings be received from the Board of Variance. This is just a housekeeping item. There's a lot of them from last year that was held on April 26th, 2022, July 26th, November 22nd, 2022, February 28th, 2023, May 28th, 2023, and the special commission held on May 31st, 2022. Mover and seconder, Grove and Jordison. Okay. Any discussion? Errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous, carried. Public participation. So I've only received one written submission prior to the agenda publication, which is now appended to the agenda. One person has registered to speak virtually at public participation. And I'm just going to ask any people from the gallery that we've changed the procedure a little bit right now. We're trialing this right now. So you have a choice of either speaking at this point in time, or you can wait till it comes up on the agenda and you can speak to the item on the agenda when it comes up. You have a choice. And I was just wondering if I get a show of hands, all those that want to speak at front right now with the public participation, just two, and any that want to hold off till the agenda item actually comes up. Just one, Mr. Saunders, two. Okay, so I just want to remind everyone, it's a 2-minute time limitation to public speaking, and we'll hold it down to 20 minutes. Comments pertaining to matters that have been subject to a public hearing are prohibited at this meeting, and specifically Bylaw 1913 CD 33 2350 Sioux Road. So we have this new system. You'll be notified when you have 30 seconds left on your time limit, and then you're going to kindly hear this bell, which will mean if you could just wrap it up right then and have a seat, that would be great. Okay, so the first thing on the agenda is we have a delegation, Royal Colwood Golf Course, Golf Club, Forest Vegetation Management Plan. And understand Winston Mitchell, the general manager, and Dave Gilbert, the professional forester, will be speaking to this item. Go ahead. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry. I missed. Yeah. Sorry about that. I almost missed you.
No. Carol Brown, Citizens Environment Network in Colwood. Scenic supports a strong, healthy urban forest in Colwood and encourages the protection of trees and the replacement of those lost. We wish to support the work done by Colwood Council and city staff in this regard. We feel it is significantly important to promote a strong urban tree canopy for the environmental, social, and economic benefits required in our city today and into the future. It is not an impossible proposition for municipalities to significantly tackle the warming of our planet. Retaining a healthy urban forest is within a municipality's realm and will have a major effect on sequestration of carbon and reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. It is something we cannot afford to neglect or delay. Later on the agenda this evening, city staff and the consultants Urban Systems will be presenting the City of Colwood's Urban Forest Strategy Phase 1. Scenic is encouraged by the direction of the report and the proposed changes towards improved procedures and permitting. We offer our assistance during the community consultation phase 2 and have prepared a slide presentation for mayor and council based on comparisons of other municipal urban forest protection strategies. Our submission follows the city's in making suggestions for strengthening Colwood's urban forest bylaws. We would be pleased to present this report to council to assist in the consultation stage of phase 2. Thank you for your efforts to protect our tree canopy in Colwood.
Thank you very much, Carol. The electronic one, please. Yes. Mr. Howley, is it?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Howley, if you'd like to unmute yourself and go ahead. Thank you.
Hi there. My name's Andrew Howley. I live on Farview Road. I have one, soon to be 2 children attending Sangster Elementary. And I am speaking to you today because I am looking to get support for a crossing guard for where Lagoon and Machosen meet. There's assessments done every year whether or not these roads require crossing guards, and the funding comes from the city of Colwood to support that. So I've contacted RCMP numerous times with hopes to get increased enforcement, and that's met with some success for sure. I've been involved with the city, the community, the packet, the school, spoken with the school board, and essentially everything is coming back to if Sangster requires another crossing guard, Sangster requires Colwood city support to fund one. And I was hoping that as this budget is coming up, as these funds are being reviewed quite soon, I've come to understand that another assessment does happen for Lagoon Road and Machosen Road. I volunteered there 3 days last week during Bike to School week, and I witnessed 3 near misses where a child was almost struck, a pedestrian was almost struck, and a bicyclist going through the bike lane across Machosen Road was almost struck. Each time it's due to just negligence on the driver's part. This road was 50K for a long time. It has a culture of disregard for the speed limit. We've been told we can't have speed bumps because it is a artery road. It is a main road, but there's other things that we can do to ensure the safety of our kids. And I'm hoping that we can get support for another crossing guard, because I've actually just learned I don't have enough details to speak to it with knowledge, but apparently there was a child bumped on Friday as well in that crossing crosswalk. The need for a crossing guard there is clear. It's unsafe. That's the end of my spiel. This is also supported by Sangster PAC, and numerous neighbors around the neighborhood, around that area, Lagoon, Farview, Ben Homer, Daniel Place. There's many neighbors who are looking for support for the children and people who are crossing during essentially rush hour at Machosen and end of day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hawley. Is there anyone else from the gallery that wishes to speak at this time?
Like I do. So
Please.
I think I registered, I could speak after the presentation, but my name is Tim Kyogan and I requested to speak at the meeting. I'm not sure if you got that. Anyways, I want to speak about the proposal to calm traffic on Lagoon Road. First of all, I want to thank the council for their efforts in trying to do something about the issue of speeding on Lagoon Road. Later on this evening, or at the meeting, city staff is going to recommend a proposal to install speed delineator posts along Lagoon Road. And I want to encourage you to pass that. However, I think it's very important that the posts actually go not just down the center, but on either side of the road. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to be very effective. So other than snow removal, I think that should be the case. But I would also request that the speed indicator boards remain on Lagoon Road and that the display be available for drivers so that they know how fast they're going and that perhaps they would flash when they're going over the speed limit. Now, I don't know if this is the right way to go, but at least it gets us starting doing something on Lagoon Road to calm traffic. And maybe, just maybe, the combination of the indicator signs and displays and the delineator posts will convince some drivers that, that no matter how comfortable they are speeding up Lagoon Road, it's others that use that road are not comfortable with that, and that the city would like them to slow down. It's the right thing to do. I would also like to talk a little bit about Hockering Road and Aloha that's have a lot of traffic now coming off Milburn Drive because of the Milburn Drive speed cushions. City staff will tell you that the cushions were installed to push traffic onto Lagoon Road, which is the collector road. Okay, fine, we'll give them that. But some of that traffic is actually coming down onto Aloha and to Hockering both ways as they make their way to Hadley. And this was a mistake. It was an unforced error by the last administration, but it was a mistake. The traffic policy was very clear that if you take action on one street in a road with interconnecting roads, you're going to push traffic around the neighborhood, and that's what's happened. And unfortunately, they're not around anymore to fix this, but it needs to be fixed. And I don't know how you're going to fix it. Maybe speed cushion or speed hump in the middle of those two streets would convince drivers to not use that little roads for their commute. But I really think they should be fixed because the volume of traffic is simply going to get larger. And this is just going to become a bigger problem. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak at this time? Okay, I'll just move on. Okay, over to you, Winston, again. Sorry about that.
Evening, folks. Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi, as well as council, for allowing us the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Winston Michelle. I'm the general manager at the Royal Colwood Golf Club. Just a little background on our golf course. Royal Colwood Golf Club is a private golf club located here in Victoria, British Columbia, and we sit at 629 Goldstream Avenue. We're designed by Arthur Vernon McCann in 1913, and Royal Colwood is a traditional Parklands Championship golf course set amongst 450-year-old Douglas firs and majestic Gary oaks. One of the select few in the world, Royal Colwood receives its royal designation from King George V in 1931. The membership of Royal Colwood Golf Club comes from all walks of life. United by their common love for the grand old game of golf, our members range in age from approximately 8 to 100 years old, yet all enjoying our golf course, which has consistently been rated as one of the finest in our country. We currently have approximately 750 active members in a variety of categories, including social memberships that are available for those non-golfers. We employ about 70 employees throughout the year, depending on the time of season. And some of our grounds crew team members have been working at the golf club since the 1980s and as well as the 1990s. We understand that the city of Colwood is reviewing the urban forest management, and we're encouraged with the support of the staff at the city of Colwood to be present this evening as Mr. Beauvillier, manager of parks, considers changes to the regulations regarding tree removal and management permits. We recently had a very productive meeting with city of Colwood staff where we presented what you will see this evening. Myself, as a very typical general manager, I know a lot about a little bit I know a little about a lot and a lot about little. So what I do is I surround myself with some great people to help let you know what's going on at Royal Colwood Golf Course. I'm here with our superintendent, Don Singlehurst, Reg Coppathorne, our vice president, and the chair of our planning committee at Royal Colwood Golf Club, as well as Bruce Brown, who is a club ambassador and chair of our invasive species volunteers. And I also have Patrick Lucy here. Patrick is a senior aquatic ecologist with Aquatech Scientific Consulting. Patrick is somebody who we call upon to ensure that our committees and our staff have support when it comes to sensitive aspects of our property with things such as riparian zones. And we've also, and most importantly, we have Dave Gilbert here. Dave Gilbert is a registered professional forester, retired. And in 2004, Mr. Gilbert was joined by 4 professional foresters to develop a plan for the club's forest vegetation. This plan was to be ecologically based and sound from the perspective of forest vegetation management. This is a plan not to address aspects of the golf course design or its playability or the golfing experience. This report was intended as a tool to utilize in making forest vegetation management decisions. This evening, we have 2 purposes. First and foremost, we wish to provide council with some insight into our forest vegetation efforts at Royal Colwood Golf Club. And secondly, we would request the council approve a multi-year forest vegetation plan for the golf club. We realize that we're not going to get an answer this evening and that there would be further discussion. And we just hope that we may be able to discuss this particular, our forest vegetation plan with the city of Colwood to develop a larger scale plan in the future. If I may, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Dave Gilbert. Thank you. Oh,
You forgot to press the button.
there you go.
Thanks. Thank you. My job here is just to present some of the science, and we're not going to turn you into forest scientists. I barely know the subject area myself. When we were approached in 2004 to do this, we really didn't know how to go about doing it, and we spent 6 months trying to figure it out. And if I press the right button, we started by getting feedback from the board, and we said our long-term goal is to ensure that Royal Colwood Golf Club continues to have healthy trees varying in type, size, and age over the next 100 years. That was true in 2004, and it's true today. We've been operating on the same property for 110 years, and we grow a lot of trees. So how did we go about doing it? We asked ourselves a question: do we have the right tree species on the right sites? If you have your trees that are appropriate for the ecological site, that's the path to the future. We mapped all the forest groves, and the forest grove lines are fairways, and they provide protection. Anybody that drives along Goldstream Avenue while I'm golfing, teeing off on 16, you need the trees there, because I tend to fade the ball. So the mapping of the groves was something like this. We ended up with 120 groves. As I see, some of the groves are in the middle of the course. 16 of our 18 fairways run in an east-west direction. And that means any trees that are on the south side provide lots of shade, particularly in the winter, and that's difficult to grow grass on. The approach we took was to use the ecological management tools that all operational forest professionals in the province use. We sit in the coastal Douglas fir biogeoclimatic zone. That's one of 15 zones across the province. And in this particular zone, there's probably less than 5% of the original ecosystem that has been untouched. Right here, you're sitting in the middle of a gravel pit that used to have fir and dairy oak on it. Foresters tend to think of site productivity as a function of soil nutrient regimes and soil moisture. On the drier sites, in this diagram, it would be in the upper left-hand corner, you'd have things like arbutus. Right next, adjacent to it, you'd have dairy oak. And in the bottom left-hand corner, you'd have western red cedar. We applied these tools to the golf course, but we changed we made it simpler, and we call them tree planting species groups. We inventoried every grove that was on the course. And this is a sample sheet for the grove that runs along Goldstream between Colwood Corners and Wales Road. And on that grove, there was 246 trees, Douglas fir trees that we counted. And at the time of inventory, there was the average height was about 41 meters tall. Let's look at some of the results in the outcomes. In 120 groves, we found 45 different tree species and a total of 4,136 trees. Now, some of this counting was done while riding golf courts. So the 4,136 numbers wasn't terribly precise, but it was close enough. The forests are dominated, as you would expect, by Douglas fir, dairy oak, and western red cedar. Generally, the trees are well suited for the sites they are on, although we do have some problem children in terms of western red cedar. And as the climate warms, those trees are going to have trouble surviving where they sit. We identified the need to address invasive exotic species, and I'll talk about that more on the next slide. And finally, we identified a problem that we created in the 1950s and 60s when the golf professional at the time decided we needed to have more safety on fairways. So they went out and planted trees. And at that point, everyone knew a tree was a tree. They're all the same. Turns out they're not. So we planted Austrian pine, Scots pine, and Norway spruce. And over the last 19 years, we've done a pretty good job of actually changing those around. So for the 14th fairway that's on Soup Road, there used to be a grove of Austrian pine. We interplanted those initially with Doug fir. And when the Doug fir reached the suitable height, we took out the pine. So it's managing the replacement of the trees by putting in the replacement. And when things work out, get rid of the offending species. Okay, invasive species. This gentleman is Doug Wilson. Doug has a hate on for Himalayan blackberry. It is an invasive species here. In 2019, Royal Colwood achieved Audubon certification, and that required that we deal with invasive forest species. Bruce Brown, I don't know how he's done it, but he's managed to cajole club members to donate 1,600 hours of volunteer time in the last 2 years to basically deal with a first pass through this. I haven't told Bruce this yet, but he's got to go back and do it again and again. I beat you. In closing, I'd like to demonstrate that we have grown trees. This is the driving range and the 8th green taken in 1953. This is the same area in 2012. Goldstream Road is off to the lower left in this picture. We grow trees. This is the 16th fairway. This is 16th green, immediately adjacent to Wales Road in 1920. This is what it's like in 1954, and this is your cue. This should work. And in theory, we are told that this is the reason why we got royal designation is King Edward, the one that abdicated, used to golf there when he stayed at Happy. What streams to your right? Thank you. If there's any questions, we're here to answer them.
Thank you very much for the great presentation. Any questions from council? Councillor Grove.
Yeah, I just wondered if you could speak to me about the understory that's in amongst the trees. I know when you swing up a golf ball like I do, you spend a lot of time in the trees looking for it, and too much understory makes that harder to do. But you're talking about invasive species and salal and Oregon grape, some other.
Our major species are Daphne, spurge laurel, Scotch broom, and Himalayan blackberry. For anyone that's driven around recently, you'll see Scotch broom is in full bloom, not on Royal Colwood, not allowed. Bruce Brown's crew does a serious job of getting rid of it.
Right. So then are you planting indigenous understory in other species, or do you keep it clear?
Well, what's happened is the natives that were there are making their presence felt. So we are now seeing lots of Oregon grape. We're even starting to see some camas come back, trailing blackberry, Nootka rose, fawn lily. With care and time, our understory should look like they were before we took them over.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing your plan. We'll run it through probably our environmental committee, and yeah, so we'll look forward to seeing this. Okay, thank you for coming out. Okay, the notice of motion, tenant displacement assistance. If I can get Councillor Ward to read the motion, and this will be discussed at the June 12th, 2023 council meeting. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm seeking that City of Colwood staff provide council with background and analysis regarding the potential for tenant displacement in Colwood, and subsequent to that, to propose a tenant assistance policy intended to guide council's decision-making in cases where rezoning applications involve displacement of residential tenants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ward. Okay, I'm going to go on to new business. If I can ask Jenn Hepting to introduce the increased fee for service requests for the Community Outreach and Prevention Program. And I understand Liz Nelson is with us electronically. Yes, I see her there. Over to you, Jenn.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. Before you tonight, staff recommendation, we are looking for an increase to the budget that supports the city's contribution towards PCFSA's Community Outreach and Prevention Program. During budget deliberations, we did not have the information pertaining to the recent collective agreement settlement. And as a result, budget deliberations, we maintained the existing funding for this program. We have since received that information, and we are looking to increase our contribution. So currently the city contributes $160,000 a year. We're looking to increase that to $184,000 for this year. And we are proposing that this year we utilize our general operating surplus to support that. Pleased to answer any questions. And as you've mentioned, PCFSA's Executive Director, Liz Nelson, is also with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Jordison.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that, I think that these early intervention and prevention programs for youth are so important for our community. And, with 40% of the youth residing in Colwood that this program serves. I just think that I'd like to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd echo what Councillor Jordison had said. Certainly the program is a very valid one. And had this information been available to us during the budget process, no doubt it would have been a fairly straightforward administrative matter. Unfortunately, timing is everything. So now we're looking at it. But in terms of proverbial bang for the buck, we get 42% of the program referrals and pay 41% of the share. So I think we're seeing the value in Colwood, which is always important to me when we are looking at a shared service model with other contributors. My only question at this point is, where does this stand with the city of Langford, knowing the financial picture there and some of the concerns that have been publicly expressed? Do we have any commitment from Langford to sort of also step up to the plate on this?
I can answer that. I just got an email from them this afternoon saying that they are prepared to fund the increase.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grove?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just thinking in terms of the importance of this program is quite apparent to me, and I would support the motion. I just want to mention the RCMP represented to us concerns about the uptick of youth violence and other issues that are seem to be current. And I think that it would behoove us to make sure we keep that in mind when approaching our budget for next year, that we make sure that not only is the program funded, of course, but perhaps we might be looking at a lift to that program because of what seems to me to be a current and coming issue with the sorts of programming that these folks in handling and take care of so well.
Thanks very much, Councillor Grove. I just want to thank you, Liz, for everything the TCFSA does in the community. I certainly think it's a big bang for our buck. The preventative way is a lot cheaper than the consequences of not going the preventative way. I do have a question. I've always wondered about this, and I guess my question is, how come the province doesn't help out with this? They seem to fund everything else, but they don't seem to want to fund this. Is there a definitive answer on that?
We have some funding through the province that funds a smaller portion of the program that is more for parent-teen mediation for families that are involved with the ministry. So what's unique about COPE is that families don't actually have to have MCFD involvement to be able to access it. So it's more preventative in that way, whereas the MCFD is really for those who are actively involved with MCFD right now. So
that makes sense. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Okay, so can I get a motion for the recommendation? Councillor Jordison and seconded by Councillor Grove. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Motion approved. Okay, second item is if I can get Tyler to introduce the Lagoon Road Traffic Calming Initiative. Over to you, Tyler.
Set up these items here. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to our member of the public, Tim, for coming in to speak tonight.
Sorry, I just got reminded here. Someone wanted to speak in the public on this first. Okay, yeah. You're trying to embarrass me again. Would you like to speak? Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, we'll just wait for the slides then. Oh, it's a live feed. Okay, just make sure I know how to use this. Good. Okay, so yeah, this presentation is in response to council's direction for staff to investigate the installation of speed cushions on Lagoon. So in response to this, staff installed the 2 speed readers on Lagoon Road with the displays turned off in an effort to get accurate data or in an effort to not impact the habits of traffic. As well, staff investigated traffic calming measures and installed an additional Houston radar system to collect volumes and speeds on Lagoon Road and as well as Hatley and Milburn. So just to talk about the 2 different nodes here, essentially we have the Royal Bay Machosen and the Esquimalt Lagoon Ocean Boulevard. And we're discussing the collector road of Lagoon, but as well as the traffic flow between these 2 nodes. So that would be Hatley and Milburn, Lagoon, or as Tim mentioned today as well, the combination of these cut-through routes. Yeah, so this is the current cross-section of Lagoon Road. It has a combination of sidewalks on one side or both sides, or gravel shoulders on one side and both sides. This is the ultimate cross-section for Lagoon as written in our OCP and TMP. It's got sidewalks on both sides with separated bike lanes, and as well, we have our upcoming sidewalk project to realize a sidewalk and bike lane on one side of Lagoon Road. So yes, in response to the council's direction, staff installed these speed readers. This is a snip of just after Valentine's Day and just before spring break of the data that we received, with the average speed being at 45 kilometers per hour and the 85th percentile speed, which is 85% of the vehicles are traveling at 53 kilometers or slower. So in response to this data, staff have proposed 3 options, and those options are going from the least intrusive to drivers' behaviors to a more intrusive option. Of course, the least intrusive option being keeping the conditions as they are now. And this is only presented as now that we have this data and what the expectations are for Lagoon Road and what they are at their current conditions. So the second option is the installation of traffic delineator posts. So these are an artificial way of constricting the roadway to our minimum 3.3 meters. And it's in an effort to reduce vehicle speeds by making it more or uncomfortable for vehicles to travel at higher speeds. This measure would provide a physical separation between pedestrians and the roadway, just in the areas where they're set up, if we choose to go with the middle and side traffic delineator posts. And more importantly, depending on what the expectations are for volumes on Lagoon Road, this is proposed as a recommendation in an effort to keep people on Lagoon Road as it is our collector roadway, and hopefully not incentivize people to return back to using the local roads. But of course, option 3 is the implementation of speed cushions. The location of the speed cushions was a reflection of the traffic control posts that were proposed in Appendix C. But of course, anywhere on Lagoon that is desired, we can implement that. And John and I went out today to scope some spots. But yeah, and that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Olson.
Thank you for that. I actually just have a question for staff, and I think that we all realize there's a going concern on Lagoon Road and that we have to do something. My question is that I think it's really important that we measure the success of whichever option we choose here. And I'm wondering, are those speed readers, is the plan for those to remain in place once we implement said delineators or speed humps? do we plan on keeping those speed readers in place at least for a term so that we can measure to see if there's a reduction in speed on Lagoon Road?
Absolutely. We can certainly keep those in place to measure speeds. And as I mentioned at the start, we as well installed the Houston radar system. So that took the volumes and speeds of Lagoon and the neighboring local roadways, so that with whatever solution is chosen tonight, we'll be able to see what that impact has on the community and the local streets.
Okay, and just to follow up if I can.
Mhm.
So we did see in the report, there was a cost with the delineators were slightly more than the temporary speed cushions. It would be interesting to see, and I would like to see what the cost is to maintain those speed readers as well. Keeping those in place as well. So at some point,
Certainly.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jensen?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. As long as I've been on council, we've been talking about this corridor, and I think it's time that we do move forward. Traffic isn't, I mean, I think we got a bit of a break during COVID for maybe a couple of years with reduced commuting traffic, but seems like it's right back to where it was before. A couple of questions. Well, I guess one primarily, I notice it's very distinct options of the posts or the mats. Is there any reason why we're not using them in concert with each other?
No, there's no, we can certainly do both. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it was just as in terms of costs, doing one or the other, but we can certainly.
So there's no engineering reason why we shouldn't or couldn't?
No,
Okay.
no, because
I have an arts degree. So that's perfect. Thank you. And I do take what a member of the public that lives in that area and their presentation today, that we are having an impact on some of the side streets. So I guess my point is, from your locations there, are they strategic to try and resolve some of the cut through traffic? You know, for instance, if you're trying to avoid a hump on Milbourne, you dive down Aloha without knowing the exact geography, you know, to get down to Lagoon, that you would be picking up a speed cushion on Lagoon Road as far as the locations that have been chosen?
for this presentation and report, it wasn't a consideration, but that's certainly something that we can look into.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just file that. I guess the point being is where we put these things matters. We don't want to have, in my mind, I envision an inability to be able to get down to the bottom of the hill without traversing a speed hump or passing these pickets in an ideal world. Thank you so much, Tyler, and I do appreciate that. And when I say working together, you see sometimes, and I think that picture that you put up there with which is in Colwood Creek area, you can, you know, if you have the right size car, kind of avoid them altogether. And I would envision the use of some pickets to restrict the ability for a car to go off road, to buy a piece of the bike lane or whatever it is, gravel, to try and avoid, so that they can maintain you know, an increased speed.
Absolutely. And
That was my vision.
yeah,
Thanks, Tyler.
thank you. I think that was something that Mayor Kobayashi as well mentioned in the last meeting. Truck that you saw observed on Milbourne.
Yep, we're
swerved
around.
around them.
Yeah.
So,
And we saw it on the weekend again. Some people are catching on to that right now. It's that one at the top, the very last one. They go around it all the time. Councillor Jordison.
Thanks, Tyler, for the report. That's great. I guess I just want to, just some commentary, I guess. I just want to not lose sight of the bigger parts of this. I appreciate that there's choices here and there's options, but I feel like we are still addressing the symptoms and not the root cause, and we just are just going to keep going around this. Having, you know, one of those options or both or whatever is better than not doing anything at this point. But I think we need to not lose sight that there's a bigger issue here. And I think the real reason the majority of people take Lagoon Road to commute is to avoid the slow speed and volume along Machosen Road. And having that lengthy 30 speed zone along Machosen causes commuter traffic to be backed up, and having, and it's not a popular statement, but having an elementary school on an arterial road with no setback from the road is a problem. I don't think today you would build that school there. So I think we need to be cognizant of this, and it needs to be addressed going forward. We can't, the Machosen Road needs to be widened and the speed limit actually needs to be increased. And we can't continue down this path of making the road any slower, in my view. The volume of traffic along Machosen Road is only going to substantially increase, and it will cause more volume as Royal Bay and Royal Beach are built out. And so I think we need to really make it a priority to start counting cars now on this route and get a better understanding of the traffic volume and flow patterns. And I think that honestly, that the sooner that we start calling this an arterial road and start making the modifications, the better it's going to be. Because you heard tonight, there's somebody up here with concerns about the crosswalk, and rightfully so. There is concerns because of the speed down that street, but maybe I think it's a bigger discussion that needs to happen. And if the school remains there, the road is going to be a problem. And we need that access road. So the other thing I'm a little frustrated and confused about is Ocean Boulevard. I don't ever think that Ocean Boulevard was meant to be a commuter road. Is it a bird sanctuary or is it not? I mean, I think we need to stop talking out of the side of our face and make up our mind. Either it's the bird sanctuary and we're going to treat it properly as such, and limit the traffic and the volume of cars and stuff that's happening down there, or we're going to leave it as a commuter road. You can't do both. So and I guess I just wanted to point out that from the data that was taken last time, the data that's taken now, it's showing that there is excessive speeding happening, going down the street and going up. What putting more speed or traffic calming on these roads is doing to the other streets, the other side streets, I'm not really sure. And I was kind of shocked to learn that in the report that we're not doing any kind of follow-up on Milburn. Like we went in and we put the speed cushions down and as temporary, and then they were determined that they would be there permanently, but no one's, I guess no news is good news, but no one's really reached out to see if there's any benefit to them being there. Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Is there other issues that, that sort of thing? So, at the end of the day, I guess any solution is better than not doing anything. But I just think that this is a bigger, greater problem, and it stems from Machosen Road. So I guess one question I did have for you though is before there was some concern or suggestions, I guess, of putting traffic calming on Ocean Boulevard, Milburn, and Lagoon. And now we've done Milburn, and now we're doing Lagoon. Like, is there any benefit of doing all three? Is there, or is it, are we going to be doing it through the whole city eventually? Like, I just don't know if it would make any more difference if Ocean Boulevard was added in there as well. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Councillor Jordanson, through your worship. You've got a lot of points there. You're right about the school. I don't see that changing. Machosen is acting like an arterial. We're going to work towards bringing back to council options on Machosen with regards to the widening of Machosen. We do have traffic counts on Machosen. We have forecasted traffic counts on Machosen, and actually over the next month, we're doing additional traffic counts on Machosen throughout the entire corridor from Latoria all the way through to Zook Road. So at present, we will come back to council with a discussion on Zook Road, then come back with some information with regards to the traffic model that we're developing. And then that traffic model information we hope will help council make some decisions with regards to Machosen Road and what kind of arterial road you'd like it to look like. Part of that conversation will be speed. I think the piece that probably won't help with regards to Lagoon and traffic volumes at this time is to do anything on Ocean Boulevard with regards to adding additional speed humps or something like that. Certainly the conversation about whether you want to continue to use it as a commuter road or not would change things drastically, but then Lagoon would no longer function as a collector road, and that would push absolutely all traffic onto Machosen, which again, depending on the decision you make on Machosen for the widening, that would be influenced significantly. So that conversation is likely going to happen early this fall with regards to Machosen. So we can certainly keep that in mind as we're moving forward. The piece with regards to Melbourne and trying to follow up previously when staff made the decision about doing the work on Lagoon and adding speed cushions on Melbourne, there weren't any traffic data to follow up or compare to. So we didn't have anything to compare. Our concern is depending on the choice that council takes, there could be an impact or at the very least a perceived impact by the residents on Hadley and Melbourne. And we felt by having empirical data prior to doing the work, we'd then be able to follow up with that data to confirm whether what they were perceiving was actually occurring. So it would give us the ability to say, okay, this is what it was. And now that we've done the work, this is what it is. So from that, we then can change what we've done or alter what we've done and make further decisions. So we felt that getting that backup data would help. So we will follow up with the data on the other side streets as well after Lagoon, is in place. And yes, the speed readers will stay up on Lagoon, certainly for periods of time. We are trying to do other streets at the same time because we have concerns throughout the area, but part of it will be to put it back in there. And if they don't stay up there continuously, because we've got other areas, we'll certainly put them back and read that data again. And obviously we don't want to do that kind of data reading in July or August, because regardless of whether the speed data works, the volume data probably will be altered significantly. So that data probably won't occur till September because it'd be a little more valid with regards to volumes. That answers your question.
Thanks very much, John. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Tyler, for your presentation and John for your comments. I'll need a minute here, I think, because, for me, this is, we've heard this has been ongoing, previous council through to this council. And I question, I guess, what problem we're trying to solve. And I think the real challenge here has been a very myopic view that, today it's speed on Lagoon. Previously, it was speed on Melbourne, people cutting through neighborhoods. What is it? Is it speed? Is it volume? And we're sort of playing whack-a-mole with this methodology. So we can easily go ahead and put some speed humps on Lagoon and see a reduction. We'll see some displacement. So just from a numbers standpoint, like I say, I believe in data-driven decisions. And, the information that I have here through studies that have been done across North America is that you put speed humps in, generally you'll reduce speed by about 23%. We can give or take a point or two depending on the city, but correspondingly, those same speed humps will then create a reduction in volume of 18 to 22%. But the volume doesn't just magically go away. It goes somewhere else. We're displacing that traffic to somewhere else. Now, we look at the same thing with delineation or roadway narrowing and things, reduces speed by only about 4%, so the lesser solution. But again, displaces easily 10% of that traffic or reduces it. Again, it doesn't go away. It goes somewhere else. So when we remove traffic from Melbourne, theoretically, we pushed it onto Lagoon. We can debate whether a lot of it then really just started going down side streets. So that brings me to the January 9th meeting where I went back through the minutes. The outcome was this decision to look at speed humps, but I felt it didn't capture the nature of the dialogue. There was other discussion on how do we look at this neighborhood in a whole view. And one of the issues I'd focused on was what we call route modification. And we've all seen it, which is no left turns at rush hour, a certain direction, that kind of thing. And I'm a little disappointed to see that we didn't explore that. Route modification has a significant impact. You can reduce speed by easily 19% plus. You can reduce volume by 42% in a neighborhood or higher. So the example I would use is that right now the goal is obviously to have everybody, let's assume rush hour in the morning, they're coming up the Machosen Hill, for example. They move into the Machosen Road area near Royal Bay Bakery. You want them ideally to turn right down the Collector Road, which is Lagoon, and follow down and continue on. Instead, you have a subsection of people who immediately turn right on Hatley and race through there and head down through Millburn and down through Aloha and so on. There's an easy way to stop that. During a rush hour period, say no right turn on Hatley, done. Now that traffic has to continue on until their first exit point is Lagoon. Alternatively, coming back, the same thing. Well, sorry, also no right turn on Millburn at that time of day. So now you're forced to go down Lagoon Road. We can then put in speed control measures so that they maintain the speed on Lagoon Road. Coming back, the end of the day, same thing. You no longer have the ability to turn left on Millburn off Lagoon. You can no longer turn left. Really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you go up Aloha or anywhere else. If it's no left turn on Hatley onto Machosen, you solve two things. You eliminate that whole neighborhood as a cut-through area, and you no longer impede traffic or have people racing to try to get out and hammer their gas to get left on Machosen during rush hour traffic. So a little disappointed we didn't look at this in a broader sense, because to me, all we're doing here is we're potentially going to take a few people, push them back onto Millburn, or just push them through the Hatley neighborhood. And we're going to continue to kind of do this in a piecemeal way. I think from a strategic perspective, long-term, Councillor Jordison was on the money. People will take the path of least resistance. We need to look at Machosen Road as what it is. It's an arterial road. Recognize there's some huge logistical issues there. There's likely to be a lot of opposition from residents along there. The school is an issue, but we're here to make tough decisions, and that's the reality of it. And we need to think strategically and plan for that. But in the interim, I believe there are solutions that we can look at that address the root core of the problem here, which is that we want people, if they're going to choose that route, that they take the Collector Road Lagoon. Until we want to look at something in combination with route modification, everything else, speed humps, it doesn't matter. It's not a solution. It's just going to be a Band-Aid whack-a-mole thing. And we're going to be back here in 3 to 4 months with some more information and start this whole thing all over again. So, I'm either going to be seeking an amendment to look at some route modification in terms of timed inability to turn, or I can't support it because it's just going to be an endless cycle. And I think we can do better. Thank you.
Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If the with the presentation before here, I think I prefer option 2 of your layout with the delineators. However, they don't capture the Hockering Aloha crossover aspect. So maybe one of them or both of them can be located further down the hill. I'm not sure. Prefer them to the speed humps, which just personally hate them. I don't know anybody who likes them. And it's like you're holding everybody after class because somebody did something they shouldn't, and everybody suffers. And we do want to slow the traffic, however, and I get that. And personally, I actually think the delineators work. They do have a psychological effect. I believe that would be positive. Then to find that information, I think we need to leave the radar counters, but that the lights should be left off for now until we can compare them. I just want to make the comment about the lights. I know there was some suggestion that maybe they come back on, and at some point that would probably work. But however, of course, now we have this new information from Councillor Ward about the idea of the route, the signage. Fine, and I would. Why not? If that information helps us solve the problem better, I'm concerned in that enforcement then would be an issue, but that would sure remain to be seen. So if you were Councillor Ward to do an amendment, I would probably support that, but otherwise I prefer the delineator option down the hill further to capture the Hockering crossover issue a little bit. And yeah, we try to get to the bottom of this. Of course, we'd always close the bridge, folks. Thought I'd throw that in just for fun of it. Thank you.
So Councillor Jenn, this is the first time you're speaking to this, correct? I'll just pipe in here first before I go back to everyone for a second time here. I'm very much thinking along the same lines as Councillor Ward, to tell you the truth on this. The chicanes that you put on Hatley, is how are you measuring success on that right now? Is it successful? It seems like everyone's slowing down in there. It seems to be, but that's anecdotal. Is there, I didn't see anything where it was counting, is tracking speed or anything like that.
Yeah, so that's our Houston radar system. It's a little box and you won't be able to see it.
That one.
Yeah. And yeah, we are tracking the data before and after. And I don't want to give any data ahead of time unless you want to speak to.
We're still reviewing the data, but first results are we have lowered the speeds and we have lowered the volume. Just while we're talking about Hatley, I don't think the signage idea is a bad one. I've seen it kind of work. Councillor Grove touched on the enforcement. Signs nowadays, 30 kilometers, people do 50 kilometers, they do 60, no right turns. They'll do the right turn anyways. I'm looking at the traffic on Hatley and Milburn at around 12 or 1300 for a local street. That is high. I would suspect that the unwanted traffic volume in that area, and we won't know until we try to stop it, would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 600 vehicles a day that shouldn't be going down that road or choosing that as an alternative to Machosa. So that volume you can think would be then going back onto Lagoon, which is running at about 2,500. So you'd be increasing volumes on Lagoon by about anywhere from 15 to 25%, which then under the whack-a-mole theory that we could then add more speed humps. And then you can always take that restriction of, okay, a sign isn't working. Let's put up something that's actually physically permanent that doesn't make that happen. I have put up the signs in other areas, in other municipalities I've worked. And it's kind of like putting a stop sign where the actual stop sign shouldn't go like a three-way intersection where you put it on the through street and the stop sign doesn't actually stop people. It creates a yield, but it slows people down and it makes the intersection safer. So you don't get the full benefit of stop sign, but you do get the benefit of slower speeds in the safer intersection. So putting up the signs may, again, there's lots of people out there that are rule followers. So maybe we'll capture 20-30% of those people making that turn. And RCMP enforcement will help. And if it can be random and regular, it may do the trick, especially if it's sustained in some way, but I'm not sure we can ensure that piece. One other piece, because I just don't want to forget, if you're going to think about the pickets and the speed cushions, you can't put the center line pickets in on the speed cushions because then the emergency vehicles would struggle to get through. So we wouldn't be able to put the pickets on the center line if that's one of the options you chose. Sorry for muddling that, but I just didn't want to forget that comment.
Yeah, it was the, I don't want to say told you so before, but I remember having this very discussion a couple of years ago.
Yep.
For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's physics, right?
Yeah.
And that's what basically we're seeing now. We've anecdotally, I know we've cured the problem. It's better. I shouldn't say we cured it.
Yeah.
It's better on Milburn right now, anecdotally.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
But we just created more of a problem on Lagoon now. So it's obviously we can't just not do anything about it. That's just insanity to me, right?
Yeah.
Doing the same things the way you've always done it and expect different results. So the delineator idea, I understand it because that's sort of how the Dutch think, and how they design the roads. You change it so that you think something's happening and your brain goes, oh, I better slow down here. You don't travel the conditions anymore. You are traveling conditions in a way in that there's a narrowing. So you're going to slow down. So philosophically, I don't know if it's going to work here in Canada. Some pretty crazy drivers. It doesn't matter where you are in this city, everyone speeds, but it's worthy of a try, I think anyways. But I guess my other question, John, for you is, do we actually is it just our staff that's working on this? Is it a trial thing, or we actually have a traffic engineer that specializes in the?
Currently, we're just doing it in-house. We're using our own people, and once we get the data And if we do decide we want to get into rerouting and looking at some of those other things and the effectiveness of signs, we'll bring our technical expertise on board to take a look at that as well.
Okay, no, and the other thing I'm really happy to hear, finally, you're gonna put up counters, you know, you're gonna do car counting from Latoria all the way up to Sioux Road now.
Yeah.
That makes me really happy.
Great.
Anyways, okay, that's great. Thank you. And I'll just take it for a second round of questions. Start off with Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to address actually Councillor Grove's comment and John, you raised it as well around enforcement. I do my homework when I look at some of these things. So after the January meeting, I met with Superintendent Preston, who had indicated that Colwood hasn't put forth a lot of requests historically for enforcement in areas beyond typical, you know, school zone enforcement and such. So in a rather robust discussion about this, you know, he was quite supportive and indicated that the RCMP would be able to provide significant initial support in you know, in making it very clear when the new signage goes up that they would, you know, do that for a sustained period of time to sort of establish the pattern every morning, every afternoon, that this is no longer the way you go, and that they'd be able to provide continued support, you know, on an ongoing basis. He seemed actually quite interested in the idea that you'd be able to provide, you know, support for Colwood on a specific initiative, because again, it's not something that that he recalled in recent history having been asked. So I think that, you know, that part of the issue I think is covered. Again, I think, you know, Tim, who spoke to us earlier, I think if I'm not remiss, you'd reached out even as early as prior to the election to raise concerns around speed on Lagoon Road with photographs of children walking down there from the school. And, you know, it's a real issue. And, you know, when I indicated that I don't necessarily want to support a piecemeal solution, it's not because I don't believe that we need to do something. We do need to do something, but we can't just do it in isolation in a fragmented way. We need to look at this as a larger solution. So, you know, I know Councillor Jansen's got his mic on there as well, but I will either wait or I'd propose an amended
I'll just
action.
do one more comment, then I'll come
Yeah,
back to you.
there you go. So I'll come back then. I'm looking for my third go then, unfortunately.
So that's fine. So just to let you know, we've agreed with Superintendent Preston now that I will call him every 2 weeks, and I'll tell him where my 5 hot spots are. And I'm gonna start asking for more enforcement in that area. So we've agreed to do this now. So we're just trying to identify it. It just seems like every place in the city's become a hot spot now. It's incredible. I've never seen so many complaints about speeding all around, just all around. Hey, Councillor Jensen.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. There's a lot to chew on there, and a lot of great comments. I think that if I'm reading this right, Tyler, that 85% of the vehicles were 53 kilometers and under. Is that my reading? You didn't have a column in there for how many people were actually obeying the speed limit at 40, because 53 is still 13 kilometers in excess. That's a 40 zone all through there, is it not?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. So I don't have a huge degree of confidence that a handful of pickets is going to slow somebody down. I know in my younger years, I would have had a good chuckle and kept on going. I'm much older now, but so I do believe that there is room here for some mats. And again, I do believe that this is this is something that we can trial for a while. And if we find that certain things don't work, that was the idea on Milburn. And quite frankly, I haven't received a litany of complaints since those mats went in. So I would say anecdotally, Mr. Mayor, I agree with you that it is having an impact. So I was reticent, and I actually expressed concerns about Lagoon Road being a collector road on behalf of our first responders. And quite frankly, I think we're just at a point where we need to do something for this neighborhood. And if the fire department has to slow their truck down a little bit to negotiate these mats, and they're not very high, I don't think that's going to be too much to ask for them to do their part as well. So I am going to stick to an option that does include mats in some form or another. Again, to try that for the neighborhood. You know, I can get behind some signs, but I guess my reticence is that I would rather see a more fulsome report for this area in this regard. But my concern is then it goes away for 6 months and before it comes back again, and we've missed an opportunity here to make some changes. So I'll await to see what Councillor Ward pitches here for us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jordison.
Can I just ask Tyler, the traffic delineators, I can't even say that word, they're removed typically seasonally, right? So can you give me a sense of when they would be removed, like what month, and then when they reappear again?
It would be in anticipation for the winter months. So I imagine around November. And then I couldn't quote you on when they would return. I'd have to consult Public Works on that. But
So the only concern I have about those is that if they're actually removed, those months, there is no traffic calming. Essentially.
Yes, the traffic cones on the sides would be removed. The ones in the center would stay, but yes, those ones in the center would be gone.
Okay. I guess my concern tonight is that I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Ward's position on that this is a bigger problem, sort of like what I stated earlier, and that there are maybe other solutions as well. But I would really be concerned if we weren't able to do something tonight for the residents, because this has been such a concern for so many years. So I'd be open to like continuing investigating it further, but trying something now is better than not doing anything. So thank you.
Councillor Olson.
Just a quick comment. I think I'm really struggling with, choosing the option of the delineators or the temporary speed cushions. But I just wanted to state that, I'm certainly for a combination of one or the other with Councillor Ward's route modification signs. So I just wanted to express my support of that.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the support. I think statistically, it shows to me, at least the research I've done shows that the speed humps are more effective than the delineators. I mean, hands down, it's 2 times plus the more effective solution. So therefore, I'd like to make a motion in order to move us along. Specifically, and Marcy, I'll email this to you. You don't need to get it verbatim. I would move that we accept the recommendation to install speed humps on Lagoon Road and concurrently commence analysis and implementation of route modification, specifically peak volume turn limitations. And I'm hoping someone might second that.
Councillor Grove seconds it. Discussion.
If I may just motivate quickly, I think we've gone through the discussion at length, but it accomplishes, I think, Councillor Jordison, what we're looking for right now, which is speed limitations on Lagoon Road. Take action now, and then allows us to continue to study the impacts of that, but allows us to look at the bigger picture and see if we can reduce the volumes. The consultant studies around the Royal Beach density increases some time ago, had a traffic forecast, and we far exceeded those volumes on Machosen Road already. We are literally years ahead in terms of volume of where they said we would be. So we need to do more, and we need to do more today. So this, I believe, allows us to kind of dictate where that traffic goes. Albeit we know that more work will need to be done with Machosen and or Lagoon in future, but we eliminate the piecemeal whack-a-mole kind of approach down through the hillside neighborhood there. So that's why I believe, at least in the short term, this is the best route until we can do that strategic long-term planning.
Okay, thank you. So do you have what Councillor Ward has stated, Marcy? Sorry for the delay, folks.
Your worship, just.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
You're about to deliberate, so I thought maybe I could give you 2 cents to either confuse you or help you. Probably half will be helped and half will be confused. Hoping best result. When you make your choice about the speed cushions, the reason we added the delineating, as Councillor Ward said, it's not as effective as the speed cushions. Our concern was if we're really successful with regards to slowing those speeds down, that they will look at the alternatives, which will be Milburn and Hadley, which they're already using, and that's evident. So that will be a byproduct of putting the speed cushions in right away. We might see some quick alterations with regards to traffic flow patterns. So we might want to consider, and maybe we leave the door open for consideration after a little bit of consultation about what about if we put the signs up if we saw something that moved quickly. And just put the signs up, and I get it's a little bit of a whack-a-mole, but we put up those restrictive signs and just see if people start a bang or not, and that could be the next iteration while we're waiting for the study to occur. It's going to be less impactful, but also better because it's going to be summertime traffic, so it should be a little lighter. So we might be able to kind of take our spoonful of medicine, just not as much, maybe half a teaspoon kind of thing to see where it goes. So that might be something to consider. And, to put up signs is only going to cost us, a couple $1,000s at the most. Depending on how many signs we put up a warning sign and so on. So it might be a shorter solution as well to kind of just keep it moving forward. And at the same time, we'll look at that study if that's where you had to choose tonight. Just something to think about.
Councillor Jensen.
Sorry, your worship. I'm just reading through here this, and I just wonder if we can hear from Councillor Ward if this captures his intent, because there's a lot of analysis. So are we putting up signs or not? I'm not. Okay. If you're happy, I'm happy.
Yes, please, Councillor Ward.
In terms of explanation and for clarity, when I say commence analysis, I immediately put an implementation after. So there is some analysis in the sense that we need to understand where best to put the signs. I mean, purely anecdotally, I would say no right turn, no left turn off Hatley, no right turn, left turn off Milburn at the opposite hour. But I would defer to the traffic and the engineering experts to do that. So I would assume they have to do some analysis to go, where do we cut this off, but also implement this. This isn't analyze, come back, in 6 months with a report, allow them to do their work. At the end of the day, if, John comes forward with 4 or 5 sign placements, I don't see a need to come back to council with it, I guess is what I'm saying. I would see this as you do the analysis, put up the signs, let's go from there. And concurrently do the speed cushions so that we have some impact on Lagoon Road today. So we can do both in tandem. We don't need to wait on one or the other.
Go ahead, please, John.
Thank you, Your Worship. My understanding would be that we'd immediately try to find out where the signs should be located and install them. We would, as quickly as possible, put up the speed cushions, watch that traffic volume, analyze it as it goes, see what it looks like on Milburn and Hadley and Lagoon concurrently. And while all that's going on, also engage a traffic engineer to say, okay, is this the ultimate solution? What are the other solutions? And so much so as to say, does it make sense to physically limit these if enforcement doesn't work? Because I have worked with the RCMP before, and I have worked with Todd and his crew, and they've pulled in many, many directions, and they're really good at that initial phase. And it really is about whether we could change people's habits or not. So I think it'll work. The signs work to a certain degree, and it's really about who's making those routes and who's making those choices. Young people that, such as Councillor Jansen, that would ignore those kinds of things, then perhaps we won't get that much compliance. But if it's older people that, maybe follow the rules of the road a little more, maybe we'll get better compliance. So certainly we'll be able to see that. And what's great is we've got some background data, and we've got a really portable, that Houston radar detector that we bought last year allows us to move it around quickly, and it's fairly easy. It's, about an hour of staff time to move it each time and another hour to take it down. So it's not overly burdensome with regards to a cost. So I think we can find some room to do all of that in a reasonable cost.
So can you live with this motion as it's stated right now, John?
I certainly can with what I've got before me if council sues you in that direction, yes.
Well, I like it because it does something immediate, right? That's one thing that has to happen.
It will do something immediately when those speed cushions go in. I'm quite
Yes,
certain of
I'm
that.
just waiting for the next dam to burst here. There's something that's gonna happen here.
You bet.
Councillor Grove?
Thank you.
And then I'm gonna-
John, sorry, before you walk away, are you suggesting the signs could go up within weeks quickly?
That would be the intent. I mean, we'll quickly have a discussion with our traffic engineer to talk about where they should be located and what kind of advance warning signs we'd put in. But certainly, Council Ward's right on with regards to the right turn. No right
Yeah.
turn on Hadley is your first, and that's just an AM peak issue. And then you will exacerbate traffic on Machosen as well. I mean, the people that are complaining now about traffic being slower on Machosen.
Yeah.
If you do move, if you're successful and you move 200 or 300 vehicles here in peak time, especially that PM peak, you're now going to take that Lagoon left on that PM peak, which is a problematic movement. That's going to be exacerbated. So there will be issues. If the traffic consultant gives me anything that really causes me deep concern, I'll bring it back to council for consideration before we install the signs. Otherwise, if I think it's just going to be an annoyance and we'll get some phone calls, we'll move forward.
Thank you for that answer. And the question, I thought what you said when you first stood up to the mic was that we did the signs first and held off on the speed humps, cushions, then we would know at least what effect the signs had on their own rather than.
We'll do them both just because I know we're going to increase that traffic volume on Lagoon when we put the signs in. So I definitely would want to, if anything, if I was going to sequence it, I'd put the cushions in before I put the signs in.
Yeah, very good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I am gonna call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Okay, that's unanimous, motion carried. Okay, next item is 8.3, Gord Beauvillier Urban Forest Strategy Progress Update. Over to you, Gord.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'd just like to start by saying thank you to the Royal Colwood team that came out today. Look very forward to working with them and very encouraged by the invasive species management and the urban forest management that we heard about this evening. As a priority set out from the 2021 Parks Service Review, Council directed staff to create an urban forest strategy for the city. Tonight, myself and Catherine Barris from Urban Systems is here with a presentation on the update on that urban forest strategy. As well, we're both here to answer questions and record any feedback and input you have for phase 1 and for phase 2. So if there's any pre-questions, we can do that now, or I can just get Catherine to go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, Mayor and Council, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here and able to present where we are today. So I guess I'm not sharing right now. Are you able to advance? Shall I just say when to advance the slide, or am I able to control it? So what I'm going to do today is talk about what we completed in phase 1. So we made the decision at the outset, just because of resources available, to divide the project into 2 phases. And so phase 1 mainly focused on analysis and context. So I'm going to describe what we found out and then outline what we're going to propose to do in phase 2. Should we be able to proceed? Okay, next slide. So this is just an overview of phase 1. We measured the extent and characteristics of your urban forest. We looked at the key trends and stressors. We evaluated existing policies and then set the stage for completion of an urban forest strategy. During phase one, we worked closely with city staff and we had one workshop with the tree care industry. Next slide, please. Some of the technical analysis we did in phase one, we used a number of different tools to analyze the urban forest. The first one is called iTree Canopy. It's a very simple tool that is really good for tracking how the canopy changes over time. It's not as accurate as some other tools, but it's great for showing trends. The next one was iTree Eco. This is a very involved assessment. So it includes taking 200 random sample points across the city and going out with a field crew. Oh, I should have mentioned, so our partners on this project were BA Blackwell Associates, who are foresters and arborists. So they went out to these 200 sites that were randomly selected by the software and did an inventory of an 11-meter radius around each point and did an inventory of every tree within each of those plots, which gives us a lot of information about the urban forest with lots of detail about each tree. We did our policy review, and then we did a preliminary GIS analysis. The CRD had done a tree canopy overview using LiDAR, and we used that data to look at the relationship of the tree canopy to different neighborhoods, land uses, land ownership, and equity. And then we also did a really high level preliminary canopy forecast. So next slide, please. There are some really strong interconnections of the urban forest with your other sort of plans and high level initiatives. So the OCP, the Low Carbon Resilience Action Plan, and the Natural Asset Inventory all talk about the importance of the urban forest to the city, as do these other plans that are mentioned here. So there is already a really strong high level policy context for reviewing the urban forest, or for valuing the urban forest. Just want to put forward a definition. So the urban forest is all the trees and associated vegetation on private and public property, as well as the soils that sustain them within your jurisdiction. So this is including trees in natural areas and more manicured settings, such as parks, roads, and all your different types of development. Okay, next. There are, as we all know intuitively, but more and more, there's lots and lots of data about the values of the urban forest. So from an environmental perspective, it's helping us with many ecological functions and services, provides habitat for wildlife, shade, which has then also economic impacts, filters pollutants from the air. And one really amazing thing about it is it's just absolutely intricately tied with climate resilience. And if you look at many of the climate strategies, action plans, COP, all of them talk about the importance of trees in terms of helping us with mitigating climate change. Many social values as well. So there's tons of data about how access to nature helps our mental health, stress reduction, enhances urban streets and spaces. So really helps people feel better about the city and is a huge refuge on, trees provide a huge refuge on hot days. There are also major economic values, so attracting residents to the community. Business areas with trees these days are shown to attract more people coming to visit the businesses, better for tourists. There's data showing they help with property values. And then the green infrastructure, the benefits that you're getting from the urban forest helps to save the costs of infrastructure that you would otherwise have to pay for. There are also many challenges that the urban forest faces. So canopy loss, fragmentation, When you no longer have the corridors of urban forest, it has significant effects on climate and wildlife. There are insects and diseases, invasive species, unhealthy and dying trees that we get in the urban environment because it's so often difficult for trees to survive. There's also competition with space for utilities and having sufficient space for roots. And this especially comes to a crux in road corridors where these days, not only are we trying to support all the vehicular patterns of use, but we're also looking at active transportation, and both are good, trees and active transportation. And it's hard sometimes to find space for both given all the other constraints and needs. There are also maintenance considerations with the urban forest. So things happen around trees. You get litter, trees need pruning, sometimes roots can cause pavement cracking. And so all of this puts pressure on staff and also on landowners if it's not done in such a way as to sort of manage some of these challenges. Another one is just in terms of land use, balancing the urban forest with higher densities is really difficult because as we strive for more affordability in housing, buildings are bigger, they're taller, they're wider, and it just becomes really, really difficult to find enough space for trees. Next one. So we did an analysis of these particular documents in detail and looked at, you know, what are the policies that are working well for you? What are the ones that aren't working as well? And these are the higher level documents that are overseeing development in particular. Move on. Next slide. And then we looked in detail at your tree protection bylaw being the major tool that you have to help protect your urban forest. And we compared it to Victoria, Saanich, View Royal, Metchosin, and Sydney, just to see how you're comparing with those municipalities. So we looked at all that, on that list are all the different aspects of the bylaw, its scope, definitions, tree replacement requirements, planting standards, actions on site, etc. So on to the next slide. Can I request, I just realized that I've modified some of these next slides to make the maps bigger. Would I be able to share my screen at this point instead?
Absolutely. I'll just stop my share.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Okay, there we go. Oops. Okay, hang on. Share screen. Does that work? Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we're seeing your screen.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'm now going on to show you some of the things we learned about the urban forest. So this is the sample points for the iTree. This is that first tool that I mentioned. And so at the bottom, so we chose 2 years that were quite far apart and for which we had really good air photos. So on the bottom there, you see the results of the iTree canopy analysis from 2007 and 2021. And so your tree canopy percentage, so the tree canopy is the extent of trees over the land as viewed from above. And so it was 42% according to this tool in 2007, and then it went down to 37%. That's about a 5% change in canopy, but our statistical people like to say that that's really a much greater change because it's 5% of 42%. So more than double a 5% change. The pervious, so we also with that tool measure pervious and impervious surfaces. And so you can see that your impervious increased by 1.2%, and your other pervious, which would be things like lawns and shrubs, also increased. The LiDAR classification tool we have is from 2022, and that one is actually a map of the actual canopy rather than using sampling points. So it is a more accurate tool, and it showed that in 2022 your canopy was actually 40%. We believe that one much better, and so like I said, the iTree canopy isn't as accurate, but it shows you the trend over time, which is the amount of reduction that you had. From the iTree Eco, and that's the tool that had the field crew going out to all the sample sites, we can get a good idea of your forest characteristics. So your 40% coastal Douglas fir, 13% western red cedar, and 11% red alder, with all the others being less. So essentially what this is showing is that a lot of your tree canopy is the native species to the area. The other thing we get from iTree Eco is they take all that information on the trees and turn it into a valuation of ecosystem services. So looking at the values on the right, the trees are removing pollutants to the tune of $476,000 a year. Carbon storage, and this is not an annual one, this is a stored up over time, is a value of $18 million. Your carbon sequestration, and this is an annual one, is $325,000 a year. Avoided runoff, $360,000. You can read the next ones. And then the replacement value of all your trees is $788 million. So this is just one tool. There are many ways to evaluate monetary amounts of the urban forest, but the point is they're worth a huge amount of money even in ecosystem services, as opposed to all the other benefits that they also offer, which this is only a small part of. Looking at your tree canopy distribution, so this is a map that's been classified into different surface types. So the trees are the darker green, the lighter green are the herbaceous and shrubby areas. Your golf course pops out well there. And then the pink are the impervious areas. And so it gives a very good indication of where you have a lot of tree canopy and where you don't. We then looked at it according to land use. We had to play around with your various maps to come up with this particular one, which is a combination. It's mainly land use, but you have royal roads and you have CFB as Esquimalt, which are kind of distinct areas. And so you can see that Royal Roads has an 80% tree canopy. Latoria is 71%. And then Crown Federal is 55%. So you have these huge areas with a lot of tree canopy that are affecting the overall numbers. So if we look at your single family residential, it's 30%, and we look at your multifamily, it's 26%. And you can see commercial and institutional are significantly less, which is a typical pattern, as well as industrial. So whereas the entire city of Colwood has 40% canopy, if you exclude Royal Roads and CFB Esquimalt, it's actually 31%. Looking at tree canopy by neighborhood shows us a similar pattern. So Royal Roads is by far the highest, and then Latoria. And you can just see, I won't go through them, but you can see the distribution in these other neighborhoods. We looked at tree canopy by ownership. And so again, you see the federal and Crown agency land has the highest tree canopy. Municipal land is 43%, and that's going to be mainly your parks. Private land, 31%. Rights of way is the areas along road corridors. and I think other rights of way as well. Then, whoops, the next one is, I think, yeah. So then we looked at some projections. This was a pretty coarse level of projection. We were able to do a more detailed one, which is one possibility for phase 2. But in this one, what we did is we looked at your OCP designations and where your OCP designations differ from existing land use. And so in other words, any area that is, say, undeveloped right now and is slated to become whatever these various categories are, we looked at how it would change the land use, or sorry, how it would change the tree canopy. And so some of these areas are really popping out. So for example, the hillside and shoreline neighborhoods are going from a 39% canopy to a 30%. Which other one? Colwood Corners is projected to go from 35% to 20%. And this is also using the assumption that the canopy of future land uses will be similar to the canopy of those same land uses today. So in other words, we'll take typical newer multifamily use and see what the tree canopy is, and then use that to do the projection. So like I said, it's a pretty high level, but it does show you where some changes might occur. Whoops. We did an analysis that we always do, which is an equity analysis. We take socioeconomic variables from the census that often indicate neighborhoods with higher equity needs. And so this is things like percent of lower income, percentage of immigrants, etc. And you're actually the first community we've ever done this, where there is not a correlation between your high equity need neighborhoods and your tree canopy. And the reason is because you don't have high density areas with lots and lots of affordable housing, which is where we typically see that pattern. So I think in some ways it's good news that you aren't challenged by having high equity need neighborhoods with low tree canopy. So moving on now to our preliminary recommendations for your tree protection bylaw. One is to increase the amounts for cash in lieu and securities. I think a relatively easy one. The amounts that are in your bylaw now have been in there for some time, and these are intended to be able to cover the cost of buying and planting a new tree, and they're quite far off from being able to do that at this point. Another related recommendation is to move the fees to a separate bylaw that's reviewed annually to your fees and charges bylaw, which would then enable you to have the fees in the tree bylaw keep up with the costs that they are related to. Another is to reduce the security for tree retention. Right now, the security for tree retention is much higher than the security for a replacement tree, which is a disincentive for people to want to retain trees, whereas old mature trees have way higher value than newly planted trees and will for a long time until those trees grow large. And so, yeah, that's just a change that will maybe help shift and help you get a little bit more tree retention. Another is, so the tree protection bylaw is in place to protect what the bylaw calls protected trees. Your protected tree definition is really not very inclusive of all the trees that you have. And so if we look at other communities with more robust tree protection bylaws, we see definitions of protected trees that are applying to more of the trees in the city. Another is to expand the critical root zone definition per arborist best practices. So when you are trying to save a tree on a property that's being developed, the tree needs to have its critical roots in order to survive. And the definition that is in your bylaw currently for critical root zone is not really sufficient. Another is to revise the tree replacement minimum sizes and species. So right now, there's really the minimum sizes, and even the way they're measured is not a typical for a best practice of a tree protection bylaw. And then remove the tree protection barrier requirement that you have in there now. That's more of a detail. Other recommendations require a tree management plan in more situations. You're only requiring it in very limited situations right now. Review the criteria and practices for allowing tree removal. I'm aware there was a council motion recently about this one, so that basically the premise there is there should be a good reason for people to need to remove a tree. Expedite the process for hazard tree removals, which can be a challenge right now, and reduce the fees and process for trees that have died of natural causes, because those trees, the owner can't help it if those trees have to be removed. A couple of other practices to go along with the bylaw would be establishing a priority system for addressing complaints and identifying tree planting locations. Some of your other bylaws, in our opinion, need some reworking as well. It's really, really important to have proper tree planting standards for all trees. And this is trees on private land and public land, wherever they may be, including a minimum soil volume, growing medium quality, tree sizes, and tree species. And right now, a lot of your planted trees are not doing well, and it's partly because they have not been planted properly. Another idea is tree planting incentive programs for people on private land. These have been pretty successful in other communities. Adding consistent provisions to the OCP and land use bylaw, so that all the bylaws are basically saying the same thing in relation to trees. And then we had a few ideas for other bylaws as well that were sort of less critical, but would serve you well. So for phase 2, we've been, this list is actually in a different order from the list that we had in the phase 1 report. And it's partly because of some things that have happened, for example, in Langford, where there was a lot of controversy over changes to the tree protection bylaw. So what we're thinking would be a great thing to do in phase 2. First of all, start with a really detailed workshop with mayor and council, so we get your ideas on all these things we've put forward. Do workshops with stakeholders. This would be the environmental sector, the development industry, and staff. Do some more detailed tree canopy projections so that we have a better understanding of how the tree canopy will change if things go on the same way they are today. Another is tree canopy scenarios. So what a lot of urban forest strategies do is establish a tree canopy target. And it's, in my view, we see a lot of these targets, but in many communities, there's a target without an understanding of what is required to achieve that target. So what we do with the scenarios is we develop a model that looks at these different targets in great detail, so we can say exactly what needs to change in order to meet the target, and therefore your targets are more realistic. So then there are 2 main products that would come out of this work: an urban forest strategy, which is a comprehensive document that is looking at all aspects of how trees are managed in the city, as well as a revised tree protection bylaw. And we've designed our process. There was some community engagement related to tree canopy as part of your low carbon resilience action plan that you did previously. So we didn't think it was absolutely necessary to go to the public before having something in place. But we thought if the urban forest strategy and the draft tree protection bylaw could be drafted as sort of working drafts, then go to community engagement so that everyone has a chance to have input into this and that no one is surprised when council starts to move ahead. And then out of that would come your final urban forest strategy and bylaw, along with a communications piece that would explain more about what this is and why you're doing it on your website. So that is the thinking. And that's it. So over for discussion, I guess maybe I'll just address what might be on council's mind. I'm guessing is that there is the option of doing a minor amendment to the tree protection bylaw now. Our feeling as professionals in this area is that it would be better to wait and do this more comprehensive review and then do a major revision to your tree protection bylaw to make it more effective. So I will stop sharing and over to discussion.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I'll open the floor to council for questions. Okay, seeing none. I do have a question right now. As far as you showed some of the metrics that you have up there right now, tree canopy percentage, LiDAR, I believe in LiDAR. It's probably the most accurate method of looking at canopy. So 40%, like, how does that rank? Like, what does that mean to me? Like, it's meaningless because, you know, is 40% like a good number to have? Should we be 50%? You know, it's a meaningless number to me right now. So what's the benchmark? I guess that's what I'm missing right now. That goes along with all the other measurements that you had up there. You show the dollar values that we have. Is that a good thing per capita or per, you know, the amount of land we have right now? That's what I don't understand. So they're all just numbers to me and I'm going, wow, that's nice. But what does this mean? Are we doing good? Are we doing bad?
Sure, that's a really good point. And we can easily add more examples into any report going forward or even this one. So to give you some examples, the city of Vancouver, I believe, is around 23% right now. The city of Surrey, which is of course a much more dense urban area, city of Surrey is at about, it's actually at 29% right now. So just with those two examples, you have a pretty good canopy. On the other hand, I don't think it's fair to call your canopy 40. I think it's more fair to call it 31 because it's the urban area where we're looking at the canopy, right? Not Royal Roads and CFB. So at 30 to 35 is a really good typical tree canopy for you know, a municipality. And actually Metro Vancouver, I'm happy to include some examples from here, but they did Metro Vancouver itself did a study of the tree canopies of all the Metro Van municipalities and has the range of tree canopies there that go everything from, I can't remember the low, it might be it's probably City of Langley or something, and that's probably in the low 20s up to Belcarra, which is like 60 something. I think we need to check more about CRD. I think there might be a range of tree canopies in the Capital Regional District tree canopy work as well, but definitely we can add some context in there. So the point is your tree canopy is actually reasonably good right now, and it's decreasing. And it could decrease quite a lot if you aren't careful. And so I feel like you're almost on this cusp of going one way or the other with the tree canopy.
So is it that metric alone that we should be looking at? Because you had some other metrics. So are there like 4 or 5 key metrics that we should be watching? And would you recommend them to us? Like I read your report, but yet it was I couldn't tell which ones were the good ones that we should be looking at, or if they're all important, because there's no context behind them.
Sure. Well, the tree canopy one as a high level overall metric is is probably the main one. The next ones become tree canopy by land use, which can be really a helpful metric if you're wanting to manage development to achieve certain targets. And then I'd say the third most important one is probably tree canopy by neighborhood, because you really don't want certain areas of the city to be really deficient in trees. You want there to be some, this sense that, Colwood is a place where there's a lot of value on trees, and your environment is partly beautiful because you have so many trees. And I think it would be probably a good thing to make sure that that is true everywhere within Colwood.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grove?
Thank you very much. Love this report. It's very informative. The 35% is good, but as you suggested, it is shrinking. So when the canopy is measured, you're looking at the footprint, if you will, of the tree size. So when we lose one large tree to, let's say, a development, and we ask that they replace it with two, we're missing by a factor of 50. Like a seriously smaller canopy is replacing. Am I right about that?
Yes, that's absolutely right. If you're replacing a mature tree, you're losing a very significant amount of canopy. And even with your two small planted trees, they're going to take many, many years to grow anywhere near that size. They probably won't, and partly because the species are going to be different too.
Right.
And they won't have the same access to soil that old tree had.
Would there be typically strategies where there'd be many trees and then they'd be perhaps culled as they grow to help offset that initial difference? It's a bit of a weird question, but.
No, that's not typically the ideal practice. The ideal practice is to plant every tree so that it will be as healthy as it can. And to do that, it needs some space around it.
Okay. My last question is about wildlife corridor. I think I read in your report somewhere about disjointedness or breaking up the forest into smaller bits. Could you speak to that a little bit about wildlife corridors and how perhaps our zoning or our land use could be better aware of that?
Yes, well, wildlife corridors are very important to the species that live in them. So, the most obvious one was we start with the salmon and the fish, and those are our rivers and riparian corridors. But many other wildlife are using those riparian corridors as well as the corridors that maybe connect those to the forested lands. So this is all the birds and the small mammals and the insects, and it's all an ecosystem, right? And so if you have big gaps, some of the species are not able to cross those gaps. So you then get fewer wildlife because they can't all survive and they just don't have a large enough area to live in.
Right. Thank you very much.
No other questions. Thank you very much, Catherine. Again, learned a lot. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's 8:30 right now. I'm just going to take a 5-minute health break right now. And if you can be back here in 5 minutes and we'll get everything else done here. Thank you. Okay. Just missing Councillor Jensen. Oh, there he is. Okay, we'll kick it off with 8.4, but before you start, Iain, I'm just going to ask if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this item, which is on the Parks Improvement Development Cost Charge Bylaw. No? Don't see any hands. Okay, over to you, Iain.
Thank you, Worship. So administration is introducing the draft Parks Improvement Development Cost Charge Bylaw before you tonight with a staff report and a background report compiled on the city's behalf by the DCC specialist at Urban Systems. Speaking of, I'm joined by Sean Heffernan and Kelsey Tyerman, planners with Urban Systems, who will be presenting the financial model compiled to propose the Parks Improvement DCC program. The staff recommendation that comes with the report is that council direct administration to return with a final draft Parks Improvement DCC bylaw for consideration of 3 readings. Right now, we're tracking towards the June 12th meeting. Once 3 readings of the bylaw are complete, it will be submitted to the province for ministerial approval. It is administration's goal, pending council's direction, to have a Parks Improvement DCC bylaw in place sometime in the 3rd quarter of this year. Following this, we propose to also advance a Parks Acquisition Development Cost Charge program later in 2023. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge the Urban Development Institute and local representatives of the development industry who took time to provide their input on the city's proposed DCCs. I now ask that Urban Systems be permitted to make their presentation. Thank you.
Please, thank you.
Thank you, Iain, and good evening, everyone. So I will be walking us through the Park Improvement DCC program, and I will invite my colleague Sean to join us at the end here for any questions. I do just want to start off by saying that when I say DCC, I am referencing development cost charges. Great, so for the presentation today, I will just go over a quick introduction and overview of DCCs in the city today, and then I will walk us through a DCC 101, which will then lead us into the program development of the technical inputs that went into place to creating this program. And then I will touch on the proposed rates that have come out. And we'll briefly cover any key considerations when looking at a development cost charge bylaw. And then we'll open the floor to any questions and next steps. So currently in the city of Colwood today, there are no parks DCCs. The city currently does charge DCCs for roads and sewer enhancement. Water DCCs are collected by the city on behalf of the Capital Regional District through the Juan de Fuca Water DCC. So moving us into a DCC 101, what are DCCs? So DCCs are one of the many cost recovery and cost sharing tools that fund infrastructure. They are fees collected from developers on a user pay basis to help fund the cost of growth related infrastructures and parks. They are an effective tool for Colwood to recover a portion of costs that are associated with servicing new development and avoid placing the burden of new servicing costs on existing ratepayers by charging developers that benefit from the new services. Powers established DCCs are regulated by the Local Government Act, also through the Development Cost Charge Best Practices Guide that was published by the ministry in 2000. It is best practice to update a DCC bylaw for a minor update every 1 to 3 years and a major update every 3 to 5 years to stay on top of inflation, costs of construction, costs of materials, and the realities of future capital costs. And DCCs do work on the benefit or pay principle. So whoever is deemed to receive the most benefit through the establishment of the infrastructure will pay a greater portion of the costs. And then looking at the philosophy of DCCs, so DCCs foster fairness on the notion that growth pays for growth. It ensures consistency, certainty, and transparency with the development community through the collection and a clear policy framework and certain procedures in place for collection. And by creating a DCC program, it identifies projects over a 20-year timeline, and this minimizes financial risk to the city and continues as it continues to grow and ensures timely processing of development applications. And so the focus of today is looking at parkland improvement. And so through the DCC best practices and through the Local Government Act, there are certain criteria in place for works related to parkland improvements. So here on the slide, we've listed the specific works that are eligible under a DCC Parks bylaw. And this includes fencing, landscaping, drainage and irrigation, trails, restrooms, change rooms, playground equipment, and playing field equipment. With that being said, there are certain items that DCCs do not pay for. So what that includes is the operation and maintenance of cities' parks, new or upgraded works needed for the existing population. And it also includes new libraries, fire halls, police stations, or any other parks and recreational buildings. This also includes parking lots, sports field lighting, artificial turf, and sports courts. And who pays for DCCs? So DCCs are paid by applicants or developers at the time of subdivision, only for the approval of to create single-family development sites, or at building permit, which is for multifamily residential, commercial, industrial, or institutional developments. And so when creating a DCC program, there are various technical inputs and council inputs that help us create the draft rates. So you'll see here on the slide, we have the 3 blue inputs. This looks at growth and population projections. So with that, we look at building permit data, any recent reporting around population projections for the community. And then we move into looking at capital costs and capital projects. With that, we also pay close attention to timing, whether it's short, medium, or long term. And with that, we do base all of these projects on conversations with staff, master planning, strategic plans, and capital plans. And then from there, we determine something called the benefit factor. And so this is really a percentage that is placed on each project that looks at what benefit it has to existing population or to new developments. And then with that, we add a municipal assist factor. And so this is dependent entirely on council, and it can be anywhere from 1% to 99%. And so this is all put into a financial model that then gives us the draft rates. So yeah, that's kind of the breakdown. And I will get into all of those details momentarily here in the program development. So work done to date, as I mentioned, we have developed the financial model. We've worked closely with staff to build out those technical inputs with growth projections and the project timeline. So this program will be over a 20-year timeframe. And we have developed the project list based on conversations with staff. And as I mentioned, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, as well as the Very Parks Management Plans. And then lastly, we have determined those project benefit allocations. And this does include determining the relative benefit of each project to the existing community, as well as new development. So just getting into those into a little bit more detail here regarding the timeline. So these population growth projections were based on the recent Collier's report, the demographic and land yield study. And this was vetted by staff during a few workshops that we had. And so over the 20-year time frame, we've estimated around 1,500 single family dwelling units, 3,000 medium density units, such as townhomes, 3,500 high density residential units, such as apartments, almost 3,500 square meters of commercial space, 120,000 square meters in industrial space, and almost 53,000 square meters in institutional space. And so with the project list, I did speak to this, but we developed those lists through the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, Parks Management Plans, and this was vetted for eligibility according to the ministerial requirements for DCCs. So we did base all of these projects with the DCC Best Practices Guide to ensure that they were eligible for the program. And capital costs for projects are based on the project lists that include contingency, engineering, and administration costs. So those have been included into the project lists. And lastly, just speaking here on the last technical input of the project benefit allocations. So the benefit allocation for all projects range between 25% and 100%, with the majority of projects landing at 50%. Which basically means that this is an equal benefit for new development in the existing population. So factors considered in determining the benefit allocations include proximity to areas experiencing new growth or redevelopment, population growth, new versus existing, and project triggers and timelines. So here we're on to the council input, which is through the municipal assist factor. So I mentioned that this is regulated through the Local Government Act, and it does require that local governments must assist for DCCs. So yeah, this is set by council and it ranges from at least 1% to 99%. We do typically see in communities, it lands between 1% and 5% of an assist. And it's important to note that the assist amount is funded from municipal non-DCC revenues, such as taxes. For this program, we recommend that a municipal assist of 1% be carried forward. So now getting a high-level look into the program that has been developed. So the total program cost falls at around $35.6 million. Based on the technical inputs, the DCC recoverable dollars that the city would collect out of the total program would be 17.8 million, which is 50% of the total cost. And then with a 1% assist factor, the city would be responsible to cover the other 50%, which is 17.8 million. And so DCCs are levied on a per lot basis for low density residential and on a per unit basis for medium density residential, high density residential, and then on a per square meter of gross floor area for commercial, industrial, and institutional. So the draft parks improvement DCC rates are provided in this table, and these do assume a 1% municipal assist factor. So as we can see, for low density residential, the charge would fall at around $2,700 per lot, $2,381 per unit for medium density residential, around $1,500 per unit for high density residential, and then $10.21 per square meter for commercial and for institutional, and then $5.10 per square meter for industrial. So when developing a program, it's really helpful to see what other communities are charging for a comparison. So the graphic developed here showcases comparable communities and their DCC rates across low density residential. So you'll see the blue bar shows DCCs for parks across communities, and the beige bar showcases all other DCCs such as roads, sewer, water, and drainage. So I should note that all parks DCC rates in this graph include both park improvement and parkland acquisition charges, as most communities amalgamate the two, with the exception of Colwood. So as Iain mentioned earlier, this is just for park improvement. Parkland acquisition is planned to come later. So you can see that the City of Colwood's total DCCs, including the draft park improvement program, falls on the lower end of DCCs across the comparable communities. And just to get a little bit more granular, this slide does show just isolating the parks DCCs across communities. So you can see that parks DCC rates range anywhere from $1,400 to $3,800 per single family lot. And you'll see that Colwood's proposed park improvement DCC rates is around $2,700, which is on the mid to lower end compared to these communities. So other considerations. There are statutory DCC exemptions identified in the Local Government Act. Some exemptions include places of worship and development that does not impose a new capital cost burden. Additionally, a DCC is not payable for developments containing fewer than 4 self-contained residential units, or for residential units that are greater than 29 square meters in size, or for building permits valued under $50,000. However, a local government may vary a DCC bylaw to increase or include any of these conditions into their bylaw. Another thing to note is that the new DCC rates will come into force immediately once a DCC bylaw is adopted by council. However, the Local Government Act provides a 1-year protection period from rate increases for the development applications that have been submitted prior to the adoption rate. So this does apply to complete building permit and subdivision applications that are received prior to the adoption. But therefore, since this is a new DCC that is being initiated, there will be no previous park improvement rates charged to any developments that will receive final subdivision or building permit approval within 12 months of the adoption of this bylaw, if it is to be adopted. And I do want to speak to, just elaborate a bit more on what Iain mentioned. We did speak to the development community. So through the best practices guide, it recommends consulting with key stakeholders in the development industry as a part of an update or a new developed DCC bylaw. So there were various touch points with the development community over the last year or so. But most recently, we did facilitate a virtual workshop with the Urban Development Institute in May. And the purpose of this workshop was to walk through the DCC financial model like I've just done today and to speak to the proposed rates. And so in May, when we heard from the development community, there was mention that institutional rates were too high at the time, and the single family residential rates were considered lower. So we did rejig a little bit of the growth to ensure that this aligned with what the development community was hoping for. And so as for next steps, we do anticipate bringing the draft DCC bylaw to council for 3 readings. And before the DCC bylaw can be adopted by a local government, it must go to the ministry for approval. So that includes a really comprehensive package, which includes the background report that is in the agenda package today and a few other submission materials. But if the bylaw is approved, it will be presented to council for 4th reading and adoption. And that is all from me. We'll open the floor for any questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jensen.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think this has somewhat been answered. The parks acquisition, why would we not roll that all into one? Is that statutory? Does it have to be separated?
Hi, Your Worship. If I could address that question by Councillor Jensen. Thank you for that question. We started off our conversations with UDI back, was winter of last year. And we talked about some headwinds they were facing relative to the development sector and a desire for us to really be careful with the additional costs that parks DCCs would place on the development community. So for that reason, we started with the parks improvement approach, and then wanted to get through that phase of work with the development community before we go back with a acquisition bylaw. In that sense, we could develop a model for working with the development community and with our consultant team to develop the appropriate programs. And that's the approach we've taken. So we think we're going to be landing relatively competitively with our municipal peers on the improvement side. And with the addition of an acquisition charge, we would still be looking relatively good compared to our neighbors.
And is that consistent with best practices across other communities in the region?
Certainly, it's our belief that it's the appropriate tack to take based on the feedback we heard from the development community. It's more common for them to be lumped together.
And one. Go ahead.
Your Worship, if I may,
Please,
an additional comment. It was administration's belief that substantive work had been done on our recreation master plan, and our sub-area plans such that we had all the information at our fingertips to move forward quickly with park improvement. And so we wanted to move with some expediency to get this in front of council and on to your plate for consideration, recognizing it's going to take us a little bit more time to do our homework on the land acquisition side.
That's great. And we have been anticipating this for some time, so that's great. Just one further question. Where does a renovation permit fit into this scheme? Because I see there's a $50,000 threshold. Is this strictly new development? If someone wants to add a floor on their house, you know, it costs $100,000, are they going to get caught by this this bylaw?
Through your worship, the bylaws that's currently written would be triggered by the addition of new units being created. I stand to be corrected by our team if it looks like I got that one right. But yeah, it is based on the addition of a dwelling unit. So there could be a pretty massive renovation that added a dwelling unit, but in most cases not.
Right. So if it's a homeowner and they're adding a bedroom because they're having a baby and a bigger bathroom and it costs $100,000, we're not going to tax them for that. It's with the intent of expanding the number of families that can live in one home kind of deal, or putting in 4 suites. I think I heard 4 residences was.
Yes, to answer your question. So the legislation is clear that you can only charge DCs at 1 of 2 times. And that's a subdivision or building permit for new units. So this wouldn't include anything related to renovations. So those statutory exemptions are what's included in the Local Government Act, and like arguably they're quite dated. So the $50,000 would be to build a unit that would cost less than $50,000. Correct? Yeah, exactly. And same with the exemption for units under 29 square meters. We're talking like pretty micro units would be exempt under that. The charging for less than 4 units is something that has been included in the bylaw. So those will be charged, and that is best practice. So there's an automatic exemption in the Local Government Act that says if it's development of less than 4 units, then it would be exempt. So we've included that. So you wouldn't have it could trigger something where you get a lot of applications for 3 subdivisions at a time, right? So it's a bit of a loophole, but it's best practice to change to include that in bylaws. So those are collected.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. And just in closing, I do appreciate the work that's been done on this. It's very fulsome, and we have been waiting a lengthy period of time for this, and I think it's time to crack on and implement this bylaw is my 2 cents, and I'm very supportive of all this, and I'll wait to hear what my partners have to say here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I believe we've left a lot of money on the table. This is my own frank opinion. And it was a great presentation, Kelsey. It was very clear. You went over that one slide relatively quick, so I just have two questions. I think my first question was, did you say there was a period, a 12-month period after subdivision application submission or approval? What's that 12-month period?
Yes, so that refers to an in-stream protection. So once the bylaw is adopted, there is a 12-month protection for in-stream development applications to not have the new rates in effect.
Okay, gotcha. And so my second question, it's how do you determine what that DCC, like it seemed to be all over the place. Like it didn't make sense to me why some of the municipalities were so high and then we're sort of on the lower end, and it just seemed, is there a criteria for how that's determined? You know, are we super competitive now? I mean, in the end, I guess it's the consumer that gets hit on this, but I was just wondering how that number, how you determine that number. Is there a secret little formula that you use? It just, like I said, it didn't make a lot of sense to me, and why the municipalities were so different. I thought I was going to see a trend there, but it's far from that.
Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi. So it really is based on those technical inputs that we covered in a few of those slides there. So really looking at growth projections, capital projects and costs, and the benefit allocation. So typically we see communities that have either really low growth projections and really high project costs that can contribute to higher rates, or we see communities kind of over project growth, which furthers a reduction in the draft rate. So it really just depends on those technical inputs to help get this rate. And we're pretty confident in the inputs that were put into this program with the Collier's report and various great parks and recreation management planning to help prepare this.
Great answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions in council? Okay, that was someone like to move the recommendation. Councillor Jensen, seconder. Councillor Grove. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor of the recommendation? That's unanimous. Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, next item is 8.5. This is the Gateway and Triangle Lands Vision and Action Plan. I'll ask members from the public if they wish to speak to this item at this point in time. Please come up to the mic. Mr. Saunders.
There we go. Thank you, Your Worship, council members, staff, and the public. Not much changes. Lagoon, traffic, the heating system, taxes, crossing guards. Sorry, had to get that in there. What changed from last year, though, is this community vision. Is that last year, the previous mayor and council were told that all stakeholders were in agreement. And I sat in the audience and I was quite upset, to be quite honest, because we weren't in agreement, and nor did the report reflect that. So I congratulate your staff in the fact that they've reached out to us again as stakeholders to make sure that our concerns were heard. And I can say very clearly that your staff did a great job. Our concerns were heard. I just want to comment about my comments in the report. I won't go into much detail, but the Saunders families, we don't want to see development on our West Shore parks and rec land. I think there's better opportunity. And I find it odd, or not odd, but it's systemic. It's about reconciliation. On the second page, we have an acknowledgement. The city of Colwood sits on the ancestral lands of the Temestia, the Kwangwan speaking people, and the Sunheights and Esquimalt nations. This land is defined by the 1850 Douglas Treaty with the people. We are honored to have the opportunity to build working relationships with local nations based on learning, openness, humility, and respect. We endeavor to walk softly on these ancestral lands of these Lekwungen peoples and First Nations. What's proposed in this, and what was proposed at our stakeholder meetings, is not walking softly on parkland, in my opinion. And nor should we have towers on parkland. There's an opportunity to create right now an actual partnership with all First Nations. They don't have a host, for their sports. They deserve that. They should become full partners. And there's other information that I'd like to share with you with respect to emergency planning and whatnot. I'd love you to reach out, or I can reach out to you to talk further. I know I'm limited to 2 minutes. I just want to say thank you to the staff and for changing the reports. We're happy with it. I like the flowering baskets as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dave. Any other, anyone else from the public wish to speak to this item at this point in time? Okay, over to you, Iain. Please introduce.
Thank you, Your Worship. So it is an honor to present to Council the second draft of the Colwood Gateway Triangle Lands Vision and Action Plan. This represents the culmination of work that took the last 18 months. Residents and property owners have come together to work with the city on a plan that sets the stage for positive change for the next 30 to 50 years in this important part of Colwood. I'd just like to acknowledge the several attendees here tonight that represent property owners in both the Gateway and Triangle lands and thank them for attending tonight. This evening, I'll be focusing on the work that has been done since the first draft was endorsed by council for the purposes of seeking public and stakeholder feedback late spring, early summer last year. I love this vision. It's the shortest vision I've ever worked on, and I think it really says it all. The impetus for this plan came from Colwood Council and the desire to clarify the city's vision for this important part of the community. The goal being to ensure that the right guidance is in place for the development community to work with the city on achieving its vision and to ensure that our rules are not hindering their ability to do so. This plan therefore goes into more detailed conceptual road and urban designs than what is contained in our Fish Community Plan. The project was undertaken with the assistance of a team of consulting architects and urban designers with Modus Planning, Design and Engagement. Edward Porter, our lead consultant with Modus, is joining us remotely to assist with any questions you may have. The bulk of the work in this project came in the form of several design charrettes that included Colwood Council, West Shore Parks and Rec staff, and owners, as well as residents of the lands within the study area. Colwood Council endorsed the first plan in the summer of 2022 for the purposes of seeking stakeholder input, and staff referred it to various local jurisdictions and stakeholders, as well as the general public. We also presented the first draft of the plan to the West Shore Parks and Rec Board on September 8th, 2022. Feedback from the board was relatively positive, and we were invited to return to discuss next steps after the municipal election, pending direction from Colwood Council. On February 24th, 2023, the city hosted an in-person meeting of the mayors of the 5 West Shore municipalities to present the draft plan to answer any questions they had. Their discussions were generally positive, and we were encouraged to continue the process with the property owners, including West Shore Parks and Recreation. Over the second half of 2022 and the first half of 2023, staff met with other property owners to better understand their short and long-term plans for the land holdings. These meetings resulted in changes that are contained within the second draft before you this evening. Fundamentally, this project represents a planning process to inform amendments to our Fish Community Plan that would enable changes to our zoning and development guidelines in the study area. This way, we're hoping that the city can create the right conditions for incremental and structured change over the next generation to achieve improved urban structure, function, including the maintaining the flow of traffic, and while greatly improving quality of place and experience for our residents. As such, the plan calls for the creation of a new network of pedestrian-oriented streets with high-quality public realm within 4 precincts shown in this map. The street layouts and building concepts are very much conceptual and subject to change as individual developments and roadworks move forward. The sections of the West Shore Parks and Rec land fronting the Island Highway are included in what the plan calls the Gateway and Civic and Institutional Precinct. The new High Street and future building concepts shown here are simply to illustrate a future condition that the plan could support if West Shore Parks and Recreation choose to take advantage of it. The next several slides show some of the conceptual illustrations for the vision according to the different precincts. This is looking down the High Street at the Triangle lands. This is a view of the Galloping Goose Trail between Whale Road and Island Highway, trying to reimagine a pedestrian plaza type space that's conjoined with the transportation features. The plan's designation of the civic and recreational, excuse me, I skipped one here. This is once again looking at the Triangle lands along the High Street. The plan's designation for the civic and institutional precinct emphasizes a strengthened role for the lands as a hub for cultural and recreational amenities, directly connected to the rapid bus station and Galloping Goose overpass that's being designed right now. It also highlights the potential for West Shore Parks and Rec to leverage this amazing location to undertake redevelopment partnerships intended to recapitalize new public services and infrastructure. So to reiterate, this plan simply gives West Shore Park and Recreation an option for new zoning to diversify land uses in existing parking lots and building sites, not green space, that are currently situated along Island Highway, if they chose to pursue them. Therefore, this plan would not prevent West Shore Parks and Recreation to continue to be solely the site of traditional institutional buildings and infrastructure. However, we think more importantly, it would also provide the ability to integrate mixed use redevelopment with civic uses, the revenues from which could directly support recapitalization of much needed public recreational infrastructure. Tactics such as the leasing of development rights above civic facilities could be used to keep land in public hands while creating revenues to significantly reduce the cost to taxpayer. Based on comments from local mayors and the property owner group, the second draft adds shading to the West Shore Parks and Recreation land shown in this map. This is on page 17. With the clarifying statement that inclusion of West Shore Parks and Recreation lands is dependent on future discussions with West Shore Parks and Rec Board and partner municipalities. To add emphasis to the need for Colwood to be a welcoming place for people of all ages and abilities, accessibility was added as a specific value with the call for the city to design spaces that are easily accessed by people of all ages and abilities to promote inclusivity, socialization, and well-being. So back to page 17. Other changes included references to the consideration of building heights of up to 25 stories when proposals met urban design criteria and quality of place criteria. The site-by-site approval of maximum building heights would be determined through council's approval of future zoning amendments. Wording speaking to the minimization of future road dedication needs and maintenance of an existing access was also added to page 12 under the structure and function section. All of these changes are as a result of discussions with the property owner groups over the last 12 months. So in conclusion, administration is recommending that the second draft of the Colwood Gateway and Triangle Lands Vision and Action Plan be endorsed for master planning purposes, and that council directs staff to incorporate the Gateway and Triangle Lands Vision and Action Plan into the next official community plan amendment bylaw. And lastly, that council directs staff to engage interested property owners in the Gateway and Triangle Lands areas to pursue pre-zoning of lands to align zoning within the Gateway and Triangle lands. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Open the floor up to council. I just have one question. Again, I'm just going with my knowledge with the other mayors right now. And when we had the mayor's meeting, it was very clear that they loved our vision. And as you know, the biggest pushback with the mayors was, wait a sec, let's have a little more discussion about this West Shore Parks and Rec. And I do understand, and I see the caveats there in your presentation. I certainly like to. It's almost if I endorse this, am I implicitly saying, yeah, I approve what's on there? That's what bothers me a little bit right now. It really does. I was hoping to maybe sort of say to be negotiated, TBN right across that whole thing or whatever, right? And that clearly shows to me that like it has to get through the West Shore Parks Board and the owner municipalities first. I would feel way more comfortable with that. You know, I'll stand behind that document like you wouldn't believe. But right now, it's, you know, my first impression when you put up the first slide, I went, oh, shit, it's still not, shoot. I mean, we still haven't removed that you know, those buildings, especially up where the Gary Oaks are, you know, and I just thought, oh, geez, don't want to manage this one again. So I guess that's the only caveat that I have right now that still bothers me a lot. You know, if you've crossed up, you know, cross hatches on it until we get more tacit approvals, then we've taken it further. We haven't taken those steps any further. And it goes back to something else that I've also said, because of it would certainly be nice, particularly in that area, to have First Nations buy-in on that too. So I'm not talking about the privately owned land. I'm talking specifically about the West Shore Parks and Rec land. And to me, that's important. Oh, Councillor Jensen, you have a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and some good commentary. Just from the representative for West Shore Parks Board. I mean, we're going to have some challenges at that facility in this 50-year cycle, which is encompasses this vision. I can tell you that you know, having some ability to take some decisions. I mean, we're nowhere near having discussions on this yet, but I see an anticipated day when you know, a triple P endeavor might be envisioned for you know, part of the facility. And so opening that door just a tad where it can be considered in the future as an option, I don't think is a bad thing. Certainly discussions, this new current board has not had in-depth discussions surrounding this. So there are a lot of checks and balances, I think, that are going to be forthcoming. As your representative, I think I'm comfortable with some of the caveats that have been placed in here, with the view that there will be some future dialogue with the current board. I certainly don't speak for the entire board. I'm just trying to convey my thoughts and perhaps
it's an excellent point that you bring up, Councillor. So it's I know you're going to get agreement. You'll probably get agreement on that board before you do with the mayors.
Yeah.
And so that's the perspective I'm bringing.
And to be fair, you know, I mean, we're all appointed at the discretion of our mayors. So it is kind of a circular kind of dialogue, I guess. But I have a more intimate understanding of sort of what some of the physical needs are for the infrastructure down there and the challenges that we're having now. And I can only see that being you know, more robust in the coming generations. I mean, we need another ice facility and roofs all over the place, and the pool that needs work. So those are some of my comments. I don't have any answers from the board level, and certainly you know, these discussions are yet to be had. Thank you.
That's great. And I loved your argument before when you presented to council. The way that you brought it across, you showed how this could perhaps in the future pay for itself, right? Or you know, you know, we're not paying so much against the operating costs if we did this right. You made all the great arguments with council, but we just didn't push that upon amongst the mayors hard enough, I don't think, so they understood it. And I'd like to get another crack at them, to tell you the truth. I really would. And, you know, just so that we can actually officially put it on your diagram, you know, get them to buy in. But again, First Nations to me is important. I think there's someone that we just cannot ignore in this. Councillor Jordison.
Thank you, Mayor. I have to agree with the mayor on this one. I feel that you know, I just think that if that part for the West Shore Parks wasn't shown, that it'd be fine to endorse it the way, you know, without that. But because it's in there, I'm just not sure. You know, I think that there needs to be further consultation before going forward with the document the way it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jensen.
Sorry, I had a thought, Your Worship. I mean, perhaps Mr. Bourhill can, if we were to propose an amendment where we're removing that particular piece and tabling that for future discussions. But moving forward with the rest of it, would you see that working, or should this be done as a complete package, or what are some of your thoughts, sir?
Thank you, and through his worship to Councillor Jansen. I must apologize. The presentation really did not potentially come across appropriately in terms of how it represented potential future supportable development at West Shore Parks Rec. By no means are we proposing that any current green space or open space within that facility would be redeveloped through a partnership, particularly sensitive lands such as the Gary Oak hill that's just above the library. Really what we're talking about here is giving a tool to the owners of Western Parks and Rec and enabling them to use it if they see fit. We would not be forcing them to do anything. We would be simply giving them an enablement. Right now, the zoning of that property and the official community plan designation is quite restrictive. So the status quo would not allow for that future enablement if West Shore Parks and Rec chose to pursue it. Beyond the caveats that we've included in the plan, we could certainly strike that section from the study area. However, the implications would be that there wouldn't be that tool available in the future if West Shore Parks and Rec chose to pursue it.
So thank you for that. And I think you're feeling from a couple of council members, including his worship, that there are some concerns yet to be addressed with Area C. I haven't heard anyone speak against or in opposition to A, B, and D. So I'd hate to see, 3/4 of this plan get held up for want of some future discussions. So I'm happy to make an amendment when the time is right, Your Worship. I don't know if you want to come back to me or if anyone else has anything else, or.
I'd definitely come back to you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Oh, Councillor Ward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Iain, just in terms of the pre-zoning that's requested, slide 17, I think, the conceptual illustrative site plan. So is that sort of the map then, if you will, of what the pre-zoning would entail in terms of heights of towers and so forth?
Thank you for that question. So the heights of the towers shown on page 17 was probably the most contentious part for our property group. We worked with our urban design team at Modus to come up with what would be a potential future at build out, looking at what's been built in the past and looking at what we think is feasible relative to this land market. It was not meant to show what zoning would allow relative to specific sites and specific properties. That would come through negotiation and discussions with property owners. Certain property owners have certain visions for their property that may include buildings that are higher than what's shown there. And that would come through proposals to council through that rezoning process. The pre-zoning is something that we think would be a really effective way for the city to implement this plan quickly with interested property owners, as opposed to waiting for a more piecemeal approach with the traditional applications.
Just a quick question for you, Mr. Earl. Is it part of the recommendation is to have this incorporated as part of the OCP? Is that, in your opinion, is that the best way to do this? Because I guess what's throwing me right off is that this is we keep on calling this a 30 to 50 year vision, but in actual fact, I think it's closer. It might be a 5 to 50 year vision. Do you know what I mean? So is that, I don't want it to get lost someplace on some bookshelf. So I guess maybe the OCP is the way. I'm not sure. It just seems like we can't see like an OCP lasts 10 years, I think, right? Is the ceiling on it? And so I'm not too sure if that's the best. Is that the best way to do this, in your opinion?
I thank you, Worship. I certainly trust the opinion of the planning team involved in this project. It's my expectation that should properties want to develop, that a rezoning is required, and in many instances, an official community plan amendment would need to precede that or accompany that. And so I think the approach of an omnibus amendment, perhaps absent Area C, to the official community plan as a next step, following the first step of using the document for master planning purposes in conversation with the community and with applicants, I think makes all the sense in the world. Your point about not it getting lost on a shelf, getting it into our official community plan ensures that you're looking in one spot for it. That plan should have a 20 or 30-year planning horizon, notwithstanding it should be updated more frequently than that.
Great, thank you very much. It's great, great answer. Okay, so any other discussion? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion, please. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was busy trying to type it out for Marcy here, but I'm gonna have to spitball Marcy. It should be brief. Just I think we accept a staff recommendation absent Area C for future, based upon future negotiations or dialogue, something like that.
Does that sound good? Yeah.
Yes, Your Worship. I have to say I had a great time presenting to the last West Shore Parks and Recreation Board, and I was looking forward to getting a chance to talk to the next one.
There's only one person left from, no, two. There's two representatives left, so.
Can I get a seconder on the motion? Okay, Councillor Grove. Any further discussion? You want to motive? No, there's no more. I think we killed this one. Call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Favor? Okay, sure. It's absolutely. You just reread it, Marcy. So the only exception was that Area C wouldn't be.
That council endorsed the Gateway and Triangle Lands Vision and Action Plan for master planning purposes with the removal of Area C, and that council directs staff to incorporate the Gateway and Triangle Lands Vision and Action Plan into the next official community plan amendment bylaw. And further, that council directs staff to engage interested property owners in the Gateway and Triangle Lands area to pursue pre-zoning of lands to align zoning with Gateway and Triangle Lands Vision and Actions Plan, including the owners of the property located at 1860 Island Highway.
Very good.
Your Worship, if I might just, for clarity, note for council that Area C does include the park and ride parcel the city owns. So if council's desire is to simply remove the West Shore Parks and Recreation land, the wording should likely reflect that as opposed to Area C.
Less the park and ride area. Can you change that then? Yeah, sorry, that's a good point. Forgot that's part of C. That's yeah. No. That's yeah. Okay, so call the question again. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Motion approved. Thank you very much. Sandra.
Thank you, Your Worship.
We're gonna have to go real fast.
We're nearing the end. I'll go quickly. I think I have a presentation coming up just to run quickly. I'm here to seek direction from council to receive the household prosperity report and direct staff to proceed with a household prosperity survey of residents. So household prosperity, as you know, considers economic factors such as income, housing, and education, but also the social, cultural, and environmental aspects that contribute to well-being and quality of life. This Colwood-specific quantitative baseline data about household prosperity prepared by the Community Social Planning Council for Colwood, along with the Ideas Fair and Citizen Satisfaction Survey, will help the city make informed decisions that focus on creating a thriving community. Ground truthing the data in the report, through a survey that gives residents the opportunity to share their experience and perspectives will further enhance the city's ability to achieve this. So as council has made it clear, we're eager to invite residents into conversations about their community to improve access to information so residents can provide informed input, to quantify that input, to inform decision-making and measure change over time, and to ground truth that data with qualitative input to ensure it aligns with residents' experience of Colwood. So as you know, one of the first forays into that increased engagement was the Ideas Fair on February 11th that engaged about 400 residents on a number of themes. That data will be used in conjunction with the citizen satisfaction survey that heard from 361 residents. And now this household prosperity report, which helps us understand our community a little bit better through data. So some of the things we've learned just quickly through the data, we have a growing and aging population. And some of the questions we might ask through the survey, which will be put out to RFP for a qualified research company to help us conduct. What is your experience of Colwood as it grows? The diversity of Colwood, the friendliness, the connections, the energy that Colwood has. So understanding that better from people. Colwood has higher than average incomes compared to some of our neighboring municipalities. So some of the questions we could delve into there. Residents, are you able to cover your costs and still have time for wellness, for family, for recreation, those aspects that we consider full prosperity? We have high home ownership rates in Colwood. So we could be asking residents, have you faced challenges with finding housing? Are you able to afford a home in Colwood? Does your housing situation support or detract from your quality of life? We have an increasing number of renters, so we could be asking them about their experience finding rental spaces, the suitability of the kind of rentals we have now in terms of space, parking, accessibility, and transportation options. Colwood residents are hard at work. We have the lowest unemployment rate compared to the region. And so we could be asking about what would help them live and work within Colwood. What kind of business type do they aspire to? Work from home amenities, co-working spaces, those kinds of themes, delving deeper into those. Colwood residents make the most of their education. So what we learned is that we have a lower number of university educated residents, but conversely, higher income levels. And so it's an opportunity to delve into that a little bit more. Opportunities to improve access to education, or why did you make the education choices you've made, and would you do differently? Those kinds of questions. Active living, of course, is an area Colwood is working to improve, so we can delve into those sorts of questions. What would encourage you to walk or cycle more often? Are you aware of some of the exciting plans that Colwood has in terms of active transportation? Galloping Goose Bridge, Waterfront Pathway, the Gateway Vision we just talked about, and are there other things you would like to see Colwood strive for in that area? Shifting modes of transportation, a goal of Colwood's. We could be delving into those habits that we learned about through the Household Prosperity report. We've learned about how much time people are spending commuting. So do you spend more time commuting than you would like? How often are you stuck in traffic? Does Colwood offer realistic alternatives, and what could we do to improve that? Colwood has consistently lower crime rates than BC, but what we heard through the citizen survey in particular is that community safety was an issue for people. So I think it's about understanding what they mean by community safety. And we could be delving into some of those questions. Is it about traffic safety? Is it about street lighting, policing, emergency preparedness, wildlife awareness? What is people's perception of safety? And therefore, how can we help achieve that through our policy? Healthcare, of course, a provincial challenge. Looking more deeply into that, it really is a provincial challenge, but are there ways we can help? How can we help you stay active in Colwood? Do you have access to a healthcare provider, and what sorts of options can the city explore in terms of zoning, in terms of billing incentives to help people get the kind of care they're looking for? And then, of course, emerging themes through the citizen survey and the Ideas Fair, recreation. What are their interests? How should we prioritize the investments that we are preparing to make in Colwood in terms of recreation? Seniors have talked about, for example, facilities, outdoor and indoor, physical modalities and things. So where, what kinds of things? Let's get specific about that. Ideas and concerns about food security, accessibility, neighborhood connections, youth facilities, what are their interests, where would they like to see facilities, community groups. Are there additional community groups that that residents would like to see formed along the lines of Scenic and Friends of Havenwood, other groups that we've seen? How else can we support that? Volunteering, we have the volunteer engagement strategy coming back to council within the next month or so. So understanding from people what they would like to see there. So the recommendation on your agenda tonight is that council receive the household prosperity report and direct staff to proceed with a survey of residents. And I open the floor to questions or comments.
Thanks very much. Great summary. Sorry about that, Sandra. We always keep it to last. Any questions? I just have a quick one here. In this case, how are we gonna make sure we get these surveys and out there and responded to this time? We must have learned some lessons, right?
We did. Thank you for that question. And I have been in touch with contact that you provided, Mayor Kobayashi. Thank you for that. He suggests the same Canada Post method, but with some refinements. So we'll be looking into that and also exploring some other options around direct distribution that we will use. I guarantee you, we will make sure that it's received by all residents.
Thanks very much, Sandra. Yeah, I'm really glad that health question is being asked too. So who's actually making up the questions? Is it the firm you're hiring and that's doing this?
Yeah, the plan is to put out an RFP for a company to help us do that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, super. Any other questions? So this is just so can I get someone to move the recommendation? Okay, Councillor Grove, second by Councillor Olson. Discussion, seeing none, all in favor? That's unanimous. Motion approved. Thank you very much, Sandra.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're gonna get to bylaws. Bylaw number 1986, Transit Growth Area 1 Zone Amendment, first, second, and third reading. And I believe we have someone that wants to speak to this one. I'm so sorry that you had to sit through all of that.
It helps me learn a little bit about what's going on. I don't always get a chance to look. And this is one where I haven't had a chance. I have a family member in Vancouver having a transplant, so I'm going back and forth. So I just came in on this and didn't see very much of the information yet. So if I get something wrong, I'm sorry about that. My main concern with the bylaws in general, to begin with, is that we're doing the first and second reading right now. And this has become a habit. And for people like myself and others that are super busy, they might not always get a chance to have an input on it. And next thing you know, it's already passed. So that's there's a reason for 3 readings. And I would like to see us go back to actually having 3 readings on these bylaws so that people get a chance to weigh in. I know myself, I want to weigh in on the parking bylaw. It was over and done in a time when I was away. I did fill in the survey, but the survey was very slanted towards only answers going one way or another. So you couldn't really get much input in there. They were slanted to be a certain way that you want. My concern about the corridor is that in one spot, it said that it wasn't just the new transit growth areas, but it mentioned transportation corridors. Myself, I live on the corner of Lyron and Allendale, which is going to be a transportation corridor in the future. And so having free reign as to what buildings and what everything gets put in those areas doesn't work for the residents. It works great for the developers, but not great for the residents. And I think that passing this will actually lessen our input even more. When I look at that new plan for that area, I'm like in shock, right? We're going from low density to extremely high density. I don't want to see that across the street from me. As it is, my entire lifestyle will change with the road going through. As it is already, people trying to get off of Machosen and go whipping through our neighborhood. They don't pay attention to stop sign. They don't even stay on the right side of the road. And so I would like to make sure that the people who live in these areas where the growth is happening, they still live there, and that they're taking into account when you're making these choices for the plans. I find that a whole blanket solution seems a little bit off because each and every development has its own specific, unique problems and things to look at. So I'm a little concerned about making it just a straight bylaw where it's just, this is the way it is. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your feedback. No others? Okay, thank you. In this particular reason, is there no public hearing on this bylaw, Mr. Earl? Jasmine?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So maybe I'll reiterate what this transit growth area is meant to do and how it's supposed to be used. So we are not rezoning any given property along Souk Road. We are creating a template zone that we have used to reflect on minimum lot areas so that residents are correct in trying to want to establish what type of development can they expect along the transit growth corridor. Up until this point, council has used developer-led process, which every developer would bring forward their proposal and we would accommodate that proposal through a city zone. So the zone would suit a proposal. The transit growth corridor zone is trying to give basic minimum criteria as to what in Colwood would be deemed acceptable so that a 6-story building is appropriate in a lot no smaller than 2,000 square meters. So if you have an 875 square meter lot, which is big for a single family, but it's not appropriate to want to fit a 6-story in that size of a lot. And so we're giving parameters to developers and residents so that they are aware that if they are sitting maybe neighbors to a 2,000 square meter property, that they can foresee that potential of 6-story buildings. But that for anybody to actualize that 6-story potential, they would need to either consolidate and buy several lots along the corridor or come up for a very exceptional argument in front of council as to why you should consider a 6-story in a smaller lot. We're not saying we wouldn't vary from the transit growth corridor. I think there are very good locations like Souk and Veterans Memorial Parkway, where we do not have the expectation of the transit growth area being suitable, because we want a lot of tightness and density and urban form around Souk and Veterans Memorial, Jacqueline and Souk Road, Kelly and Souk Road. I think those are exceptions to the rule. And so along the transit growth corridors, we're trying to just set up basic criteria so that developers know when it's appropriate to propose a 6-story building and under which, how we are going to be assessing that proposal and presenting it back to council for consideration. Council can at any time, listening to the residents and making their own assessment, opt and direct staff to create a city zone, because you may like the proposal assessed, because there may be good reasons and merits, and maybe the developer convinces you that there's enough in a proposal for it to be given
extra consideration. But at this point, we're just setting up the transit growth corridor precisely to give some certainty of minimum criteria along the corridor. It's not to say that it will work every time, but at least when people approach redevelopment on that corridor, they'll be able to know what the basic rules or minimum expectations are.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. I understood this, and I thought the new transit growth area zoning was actually more beneficial to those that live near them too. So that's how I saw it. It was better. It was much more friendlier to single detached homes in the area, especially in those areas where, you even step down buildings. I thought that was all clever. So, okay, thank you very much. So, could I get a motion, please, for first and second and third? Councillor Jensen, Councillor Grove, any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. A motion approved. 9.2, I'm sorry for this very long one. You want to read this one? Thank you.
Absolutely. So we have 4 sewer local service area enlargement amendment bylaws. Bylaw 1981, Colwood West Sewer for 3501 Sunheights Drive. Bylaw number 1982, Colwood Main Sewer for 3401 Sunheights Drive. Bylaw number 1987, Colwood Main Sewer for 3392 Fulton Road. And bylaw number 1988, Colwood West Sewer 3392 Fulton Road. All for adoption.
Sorry.